Chapter 1. The Half-Blood's Shame. The dress was the color of mud after rain, brown, shapeless, and deliberately ugly. Mira held it up against her body, watching the fabric swallow her reflection in the cracked mirror. Behind her, through the thin walls of her attic room, she could hear her half-sisters laughing. The sound was like glass breaking, sharp and meant to cut. "Mother said to give you this," her youngest half-sister, Celeste, had announced an hour ago, tossing the dress onto Myra's bed like it was contaminated. For the bonding ceremony tonight, Mira had known better than to expect anything else. In a pack where bloodline meant everything, she was a stain that wouldn't wash out. Half wolf, half human. Her mother had been human, a fact her father's new mate never let anyone forget. "The claiming will begin at moonrise." Her stepmother's voice drifted up the stairs now, cold and precise. "You will sit in the back corner, Mira. You will not speak to anyone of consequence. You will not embarrass this family more than your existence already does." "Yes, Lady Cordelia," Mira called back, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. She'd practiced this, the art of making herself small, of swallowing words that wanted to become screams. Her wolf had never fully awakened. While her half-sisters had shifted for the first time at 13, blazing with power and silver fur, Mira had felt only a faint flutter in her soul, a whisper where there should have been a roar. Her father called it a defect. The pack healers called it unfortunate. Mira called it proof of what she'd always known. She didn't belong here. The bonding ceremony was where unmated wolves would find their destined partners, where the mate bond would snap into place like a lock finding its key. For wolves like her sisters, it was a celebration. For Mira, it was a gauntlet she had to survive. She pulled on the brown dress. It hung on her like a sack, making her look even smaller than she was. Perfect. Invisible was what they wanted, and invisible was what she'd give them. The grand pavilion had been erected in the heart of the Clearwater Pack's territory, its white silk walls glowing under strings of enchanted lights. Mira could hear the music and laughter from half a mile away as she walked alone down the forest path. Her sisters had left hours ago in a carriage, their gowns of crimson and gold shimmering like flames. No one had waited for her. The moment she stepped under the pavilion's entrance, the noise hit her like a physical force. Hundreds of wolves from a dozen different packs, all dressed in their finest, all radiating power and confidence. The air was thick with competing scents, pine and musk and magic. Mira kept her head down, weaving through the crowd toward the back. She could feel eyes on her, hear the whispers that followed in her wake. "That's Aldrich's daughter. The broken one. Half human, they say. Can barely shift. Why did they even let her come?" Each word was a familiar wound, and she'd learned long ago how to let them pass through her without flinching. She found her table, tucked in the far corner, partially hidden by a support beam. A table for one. She sat down and folded her hands in her lap, making herself as small as possible. From her corner, she watched the ceremony unfold. She saw wolves find their mates, saw the joy on their faces as the bond clicked into place, saw them embrace while the crowd roared its approval. Each pairing was a reminder of what she would never have. Then she saw Vanessa. Vanessa Blackthorn was everything Mira wasn't: tall, powerful, devastatingly beautiful. Her silver gown caught the light like starlight on water, and she moved through the crowd like a queen already crowned. She was the daughter of the Blackthorn Alpha, one of the most powerful families in the territory, and she was staring directly at Mira. Vanessa's lips curved into a smile that had no warmth in it. She leaned toward her companion and whispered something, and they both laughed. The sound carried across the pavilion, and several heads turned to see what was so amusing. Mira felt her face flush hot with shame. She knew that look. She'd seen it 1,000 times before. She was entertainment, a joke to be shared. The ceremony was winding down. Most of the unmated wolves had found their partners, or were still mingling, hopeful. Myra's table remained empty save for her single chair. The rejection was so absolute it had become a spectacle of its own. Just a little longer, she told herself. Just endure until it's over. And then you can go home and... The massive double doors at the front of the pavilion slammed open. The music stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every head in the room turned toward the entrance. And there, silhouetted against the moonlight, stood the Alpha Prime, Cain Ashford. Even from across the crowded pavilion, his presence was overwhelming. He was massive, well over 6 feet of pure muscle and predatory grace. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing a face that was all sharp angles and cold beauty. But it was his eyes that made Myra's breath catch. Pale silver, like moonlight on ice, scanning the crowd with an intensity that made grown alphas shift uncomfortably. He was the youngest alpha prime in 3 generations. Ruthless, powerful, unmated, and according to the rumors, utterly uninterested in changing that status. Mira had never seen him in person before. Wolves like her didn't cross paths with wolves like him. She watched, transfixed, as he strode into the pavilion, his second and several guards flanking him. The crowd parted like water before him. He stopped in the center of the room, his gaze sweeping over the assembled wolves. Mira saw hope flare in the eyes of dozens of unmated females. She saw Vanessa step forward, her chin raised, her expression confident and inviting. Kane's eyes passed over Vanessa without pausing, passed over all of them, and then, impossibly, his gaze locked onto the back corner of the room. Onto her. Myra's heart stopped. She must be imagining it. There was no way the Alpha Prime was looking at her. She glanced over her shoulder, expecting to see someone important standing behind her. There was no one. When she looked back, Kane was moving, walking straight toward her with purposeful strides that ate up the distance between them. The crowd stared in shocked silence. Myra's mind went blank with panic. What had she done wrong? Was she not supposed to be here? Was he going to throw her out personally? He stopped in front of her table. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. His scent hit her. Winter rain and dark forests and something wild that made her wolf, that pathetic little whisper in her soul, suddenly sit up and pay attention. Stand up, he said. His voice was deep, commanding, and left no room for argument. Myra's legs obeyed before her mind caught up. She stood on trembling legs, her head barely reaching his shoulder. Kane stared down at her, his silver eyes intense and unreadable. The silence in the pavilion was deafening. Then, without a word, he pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down. The world exploded into chaos. Chapter 2, The Alpha's Choice. Gasps rippled through the pavilion like stones thrown into still water. Mira stood frozen, her mind unable to process what was happening. The Alpha Prime, Kane Ashford himself, was sitting at her table. Her tiny, forgotten table in the corner meant for rejects and outcasts. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. Any second now, he would stand up and laugh, and the entire pavilion would laugh with him, and she would be the punchline of a story told for generations. But he didn't laugh. He simply sat there, his massive frame making the delicate chair look like a child's toy, his silver eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Sit down," he said quietly. It wasn't a request. Mira sat, her movements jerky and graceless. Her hands were shaking so badly, she had to clench them in her lap to hide it. The brown dress suddenly felt like it was suffocating her. The whispers started immediately, a rising tide of shock and confusion and outrage. He's sitting with her? The half-blood? Impossible. This must be some kind of test. Mira risked a glance at Kane's face. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but she could feel something radiating from him. A deep, thrumming power that made her wolf finally, truly wake up. For the first time in her life, she felt it clearly. Not a whisper, not a flutter, but a presence rising up inside her chest, straining toward him like a flower turning toward the sun. No, this wasn't possible. "Your name," Kane said. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Mira Thorne." "Mira," he repeated, as if testing the weight of it on his tongue. Then his gaze sharpened. "Why are you here alone?" The question was simple, but the answer was a lifetime of shame. She couldn't say it, couldn't put words to the truth that everyone in this room already knew. Before she could stammer out some excuse, a voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "My Lord Alpha Prime." It was Vanessa Blackthorne, gliding forward with her chin raised and fury glittering in her dark eyes. "Surely there has been some misunderstanding. This girl, she's barely even a wolf. Her bloodline is." Kane turned his head slowly to look at Vanessa. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The sheer weight of his displeasure rolled off him in waves, and Vanessa's words died in her throat. She actually stumbled back a step, her face going pale. The message was clear. He would not be questioned. Vanessa's shock twisted into something uglier. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and when her eyes flicked to Mira, the hatred in them was so pure it felt like a physical blow, a promise of retribution. Myra's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd made an enemy tonight. A powerful, dangerous enemy. Kane rose from his chair in one fluid motion, and the entire pavilion seemed to hold its breath. He looked down at Mira, and for just a moment, something flickered in those cold silver eyes. Something almost gentle. "Come," he said, extending his hand toward her. Mira stared at his hand like it was a trap ready to snap shut on her fingers. Every instinct screamed at her not to touch him, not to trust this, not to believe that someone like him could want anything from someone like her except humiliation. But her wolf, that newly awake presence inside her, was pushing her forward, desperate and yearning. Slowly, trembling, she placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, the world tilted sideways. Heat. Blinding, overwhelming heat that started where their palms met and raced up her arm, exploding in her chest like a star going supernova. Her wolf didn't just wake. It roared to life, fully present for the first time in her entire existence, howling with recognition and joy and desperate need. "Mate, mate, mate," she gasped, her knees buckling. Kane's other hand shot out to steady her, gripping her elbow, and the second point of contact only made it worse, or better. She couldn't tell anymore. The bond was there, real and undeniable, a golden thread connecting her soul to his. She looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes and saw her own shock reflected back at her. He felt it too. He had to. "Impossible," she whispered. His jaw tightened. Nothing is impossible. Around them, the crowd had descended into chaos. Pack leaders were shouting questions. Her stepmother's voice rose above the din, shrill with horror. "My lord, please, there must be." Kane silenced them all with a single raised hand. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the pavilion, resonating with the unquestionable authority of an Alpha Prime. "The bond has chosen. The ceremony is concluded." He didn't wait for arguments or protests. Still holding Myra's hand, he began walking toward the exit, and she had no choice but to follow, stumbling along beside him on numb legs. His guards immediately fell into formation around them, a protective barrier against the stunned crowd. As they passed Vanessa, Mira heard her hiss under her breath. "This isn't over, half-breed." The cool night air hit Myra's face like a slap, shocking her back to some semblance of awareness. A sleek black vehicle waited outside the pavilion. Not a carriage, but one of the rare motorized cars that only the wealthiest packs could afford. Kane opened the door himself and guided her inside with surprising gentleness. The interior was all leather and luxury, so far removed from anything in Myra's experience that it felt like stepping into another world. He slid in beside her, filling the small space with his presence. The door closed, sealing them into privacy, and suddenly the reality of what had just happened crashed over Mira like a tidal wave. She was in a vehicle with the Alpha Prime, her mate. The bond between them was real and terrifying and still singing in her blood. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me? I'm nothing. I'm broken. My wolf barely exists and my blood is." "Your blood is irrelevant," Kane interrupted, his silver eyes boring into hers. "Your wolf is stronger than you know. And you are mine." The possessiveness in that last word sent a shiver down her spine. Not fear. Something else entirely. "The pack won't accept this," she tried again. "They'll fight you. They'll say you're making a mistake, choosing someone like me. I'll only make you look weak, and I can't. I won't be the reason you." "Mira." Her name was a command that silenced her instantly. He leaned closer, and she could smell his scent again, intoxicating and overwhelming. "I have led this pack since I was 19 years old. I have fought challenges from alphas twice my age. I have negotiated treaties, ended wars, and built alliances that will last generations. Do you truly believe I would let anyone, dictate who my mate is?" When she didn't answer, too overwhelmed to form words, he continued. "You feel weak because they have spent your entire life convincing you that you are. But the bond does not lie. Whatever is in you, whatever power you carry, it called to me. And I always trust my instincts." The vehicle began to move, carrying them away from the pavilion and toward whatever came next. Mira pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart racing beneath her palm, feeling her wolf pressing against her skin, awake and aware and alive in a way it had never been before. She had no idea what happened next, no idea how to be what he seemed to think she was. But as she sat beside him in the darkness, feeling the golden thread of the bond humming between them, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Her life had just changed forever. and there was no going back. Chapter 3. The Estate of Thorns. The Ashford estate rose from the hillside like a fortress, all stone and iron and ancient power. Mira had heard stories about it her entire life. The ancestral home of the Alpha Prime bloodline, a place where pack law was written and rewritten, where the strongest wolves in the territory came to bend the knee. She'd never imagined she'd see it, much less enter it as the Alpha Prime's mate. The vehicle rolled through massive gates that swung open at their approach, guarded by wolves whose eyes glowed briefly in the darkness. The driveway seemed to stretch on forever, lined with old-growth trees that whispered in the wind. Mira sat rigid in her seat, acutely aware of Kane beside her. He hadn't spoken since they left the pavilion, but she could feel his attention on her like a physical weight. The bond hummed between them, that golden thread she could almost see if she closed her eyes, connecting her chest to his. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It made her want to run and never stop running. When the vehicle finally stopped in front of the main entrance, Kane stepped out first and extended his hand to help her. She took it because refusing would have been worse, and the moment their skin touched again, that heat blazed through her, making her gasp. He steadied her, his large hand warm and solid around hers. "You'll adjust," he said quietly, as if he could read her thoughts. "The bond is overwhelming at first." At first, she managed to keep her voice from shaking. "You mean it gets worse?" Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Or better, depending on your perspective. The grand entrance hall was exactly what she expected. Soaring ceilings, marble floors, tapestries depicting great battles and legendary wolves. But what she didn't expect was the woman waiting for them at the base of a sweeping staircase. She was older, perhaps in her 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled back in an elegant twist and eyes that were a softer version of Kane's silver. She wore a deep blue dress that spoke of wealth and taste, and when she smiled, it actually reached her eyes. "Aunt Meredith," Kane said, and there was a warmth in his voice Mira hadn't heard before. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "As if I would miss this," Meredith said, her gaze moving to Mira with open curiosity. "So, this is the girl who finally caught you." "This is Mira," Kane said. "My mate." The words sent another jolt through the bond, and Mira had to resist the urge to press her hand to her chest. Meredith's eyes narrowed slightly, assessing, and Mira braced herself for judgment, for disappointment, for the inevitable realization that she was nothing special. Instead, Meredith stepped forward and took both of Myra's hands in hers. "Welcome to the Ashford family, dear girl. I imagine tonight has been overwhelming." The kindness in her voice nearly broke something in Mira. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Come," Meredith said gently. "Let me show you to your rooms. You need rest, and we can sort everything else out tomorrow." "I'll join you shortly," Kane said, releasing Myra's hand with what seemed like reluctance. "I need to make some calls. There will be reactions to tonight. I need to manage them before they become problems." He meant her stepmother, her father, the entire pack that had just watched him choose the girl they'd all written off as worthless. Mira followed Meredith up the grand staircase, acutely aware of Kane's eyes on her back until she disappeared from view. The upper hallway was lined with portraits of stern-looking wolves, all with those distinctive silver eyes. Generations of Alpha Primes, staring down at her with expressions that ranged from stoic to severe. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere near this much power and history. "Here we are," Meredith said, opening a set of double doors. The suite beyond was larger than Myra's entire attic room back home. A massive bed dominated the space, covered in soft gray linens. A fireplace crackled with fresh flames. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the estate's gardens, moonlit and beautiful. It was a room fit for a queen, not for a half-blood girl in a mud-colored dress. "I know what you're thinking," Meredith said softly, and Mira startled. "You're thinking you don't deserve this, that there's been some terrible mistake." Myra's throat tightened. She couldn't deny it. Meredith moved to stand beside her, looking out the same window. "Kane's mother was my younger sister. She died when he was 16. A challenge from a rival pack that went wrong. I watched that boy become a man too quickly, watched him take on responsibilities that should have crushed him. And I watched him build walls around himself so high that I thought no one would ever reach him." She turned to face Mira fully. "The mate bond isn't random, child. It doesn't make mistakes. Whatever you think you lack, whatever they've told you you're missing, the bond sees past all of that to your soul. and your soul called to his. But I'm half human. Meredith raised an eyebrow. So, some of the strongest wolves I've ever known carried human blood. It's not weakness. It's simply different. She paused. Though I suspect there's more to your heritage than you've been told. Before Mira could ask what that meant, a knock sounded at the door. A young woman entered, carrying an armful of clothing. These are for you, Meredith explained. Nothing fancy, just something comfortable for tonight. Tomorrow we'll see about a proper wardrobe. The young woman, a servant, Mira realized, laid out a soft nightgown and a robe, then bowed and left without making eye contact. Without speaking to Mira at all. The message was clear. Servant to mate of the Alpha Prime was too great a distance to cross with simple conversation. Get some rest, Meredith said, moving toward the door. Tomorrow will bring challenges enough. And Mira, she paused in the doorway. Don't let them break you. You're stronger than they want you to believe. Then she was gone, and Mira was alone in a room too beautiful, in a life too impossible, with a bond humming in her chest that connected her to the most powerful wolf in the territory. She changed into the nightgown with trembling hands, the soft fabric a stark contrast to the rough homespun she was used to. She should sleep. She should try to rest. Instead, she found herself drawn to the window, staring out at the moonlit grounds, her mind racing with everything that had happened. A slight sound made her turn. Kane stood in the doorway. She hadn't even heard it open. He'd removed his formal jacket, and in just a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up, he looked somehow more dangerous, more real. I should have knocked, he said. Old habits. This has been my wing of the estate for years. Your wing? Myra's voice came out higher than intended. These are your rooms? They were. They're yours now. He stepped inside, and she fought the urge to back away. Not from fear. From something else entirely. I'll take the suite across the hall. You don't have to do that. I can. Mira. He crossed the room in a few long strides, stopping just in front of her. I can feel your fear through the bond. Your confusion. Your certainty that this is all some elaborate cruelty. His silver eyes held hers. It's not. The bond is real. You are my mate. And I will give you time to accept that before I push for more. More, she whispered, and heat flooded her face as she realized what he meant. A slight smile tugged at his lips. Yes, more. But not tonight. Tonight, you need rest. And I need to make sure that every pack in this territory understands that anyone who threatens you answers to me. The protectiveness in his voice made her wolf surge forward, wanting to press closer to him, to accept his protection, to give in to the pull of the bond. But her human mind held her back, trapped between desire and disbelief. Vanessa won't give up, Mira said quietly. She'll come after me. After us. I know. His expression hardened. The Blackthorns are ambitious. Vanessa expected to be chosen tonight, and she'll see this as a personal insult. But she's not your concern. She's mine. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his hand. The touch sent electricity racing across her skin. Sleep, Mira. Tomorrow, we begin teaching you what you are. What you've always been underneath all their lies. Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him, and Mira was left alone with the echo of his touch and the impossible promise of tomorrow. She climbed into the massive bed, surrounded by luxury she'd never known, and tried to sleep. But her mind wouldn't stop racing, and her wolf wouldn't stop pacing, and the bond wouldn't stop humming its song of connection and need. Everything had changed, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to survive what came next. Chapter 5. The Council of Wolves. The council chamber was everything Mira had feared and worse. A massive oval table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by high-backed chairs occupied by some of the most powerful wolves in the territory. The air was thick with dominance and barely concealed hostility. Every eye tracked her as she entered beside Kane, and she felt the weight of their judgment like physical pressure against her skin. Elena had changed her into a formal dress, deep midnight blue that complemented her newly discovered wolf's coloring, and styled her hair into an intricate braid crown. She looked the part of an Alpha Prime's mate, but looking it and being it were two different things entirely. Kane's hand rested at the small of her back, a point of contact that kept the bond from overwhelming her completely. She could feel his confidence through their connection, and she tried to borrow some of it for herself. Alpha Prime, said an older wolf at the far end of the table, rising from his seat. He was gray-haired and broad-shouldered, his eyes sharp with intelligence. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." "Counselor Marcus," Kane acknowledged, his voice neutral. He guided Mira to 2 chairs at the head of the table, positions of power. She sat with as much grace as she could manage, acutely aware of every movement being scrutinized. "We'll dispense with formalities," Marcus continued, his gaze shifting to Mira with undisguised assessment. "The pack has questions about your unexpected choice of mate. Questions that require answers." "The mate bond requires no explanation," Kane said, his tone carrying a warning edge. "It is what it is." Of course. This came from a woman 3 seats down, sharp-featured, with calculating eyes. "Counselor Iris Blackthorne, Vanessa's mother. But surely you understand our concern. The bloodline of the Alpha Prime has always been carefully maintained. Pure wolf heritage, strong manifestation, proven power. And this girl," she gestured vaguely at Mira. "Half-human blood, no documented shift until today, if the rumors are true, and from a family of no particular standing." The dismissal in her voice made something hot flare in Myra's chest. Her wolf stirred, not liking the disrespect toward their mate bond. "The girl has a name," Mira said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "And she's sitting right here." A ripple of shock went through the room. Several council members exchanged glances. Apparently, they'd expected her to stay silent, to let Kane speak for her. Iris's lips curved into a cold smile. "My apologies, Miss Thorne. Perhaps you could enlighten us then. What exactly qualifies you to be the mate of the most powerful alpha in 3 territories?" It was a trap. Any answer she gave would sound either arrogant or weak. Mira felt panic rising, but then Kane's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. The bond pulsed with warmth and support. "I don't claim to be qualified," Mira said carefully. "The mate bond isn't about qualifications. It's about compatibility of souls. And since when do we question what the moon chooses?" "Since the moon's choice threatens pack stability," said another council member, a younger wolf with ambitious eyes. "You must understand the position this puts us in. Other packs will see this as weakness. They'll question the Alpha Prime's judgment. Some may even see it as an opportunity to challenge." "Let them try," Kane said, his voice dropping into that dangerous register that made everyone at the table go still. "I welcome any wolf foolish enough to think my choice of mate reflects weakness rather than strength." "With respect, Alpha Prime," Marcus said, holding up a calming hand, "we're not questioning your strength. We're questioning hers." He turned to Mira. "Can you fight? Can you shift at will? Can you protect yourself if enemies come for you? And they will come for you. To use you against him." The questions hit like physical blows because they were fair. They were exactly the fears Mira had been carrying since last night. "I shifted for the first time today," she admitted, and saw several council members exchange knowing looks. "Before today, I'd never fully transformed. My wolf was dormant." "Dormant," Iris repeated, her tone dripping with disdain. A polite word for defective. Myra's wolf snarled inside her chest, and she felt her eyes flash gold. Several council members jerked back in surprise. They'd felt the power in that brief flare. "My wolf wasn't defective," Mira said, and there was steel in her voice now. She was suppressed. By a family that saw my human heritage as a stain to be hidden. By a pack that decided I was broken before I ever had a chance to prove otherwise. But she's awake now. And she's not going anywhere. "Pretty words," said the ambitious young counselor. "But words don't win battles. Can you actually use that wolf of yours? Or will you hide behind the Alpha Prime while others fight your battles?" Kane started to speak, but Mira squeezed his hand, stopping him. This was her fight. "I don't expect anyone to fight my battles," she said. "But I also won't pretend to be something I'm not. Yes, I'm new to this. Yes, I have a lot to learn. But I shifted today. Something I was told my entire life was impossible. I'm standing in this room speaking to some of the most powerful wolves in the territory when yesterday I couldn't even speak in my own family's home without permission." She met Iris's gaze directly. "So maybe instead of questioning whether I'm strong enough, you should question why you're so threatened by the idea that I might be." Silence fell over the chamber. It wasn't comfortable. It crackled with tension. But it wasn't dismissive anymore either. Marcus studied her with new interest. Bold words from someone so new to pack politics. "Honest words," Mira corrected. "I'm not going to play games or pretend. I don't know how yet. So you're getting the truth instead." Something that might have been respect flickered in Marcus's eyes. Truth can be a dangerous weapon in this world, girl. Mira, she said firmly. My name is Mira. Mira, he conceded with a slight nod. Very well. You've shown more spine than expected. But spine alone won't keep you alive when Vanessa Blackthorne comes for you. Myra's gaze flicked to Iris, who was now watching her daughter's name with unreadable eyes. Is that a threat, counselor? An observation, Marcus said. Your mate claimed you in front of the entire territory, rejecting Vanessa in the process. The Blackthorns are proud. They don't forget insults. And Vanessa. He paused. Vanessa has always gotten what she wanted. Until now. Then perhaps it's time she learned that the world doesn't revolve around her desires, Kane said coldly, his silver eyes locking on Iris. And if the Blackthorns have a problem with my choice of mate, they can bring it to me directly. But I warn you now, anyone who threatens Mira answers to me personally. Am I understood? The temperature in the room dropped. This wasn't a request. It was a promise of retribution. Iris's expression remained carefully neutral, but Mira saw the calculation in her eyes. Of course, Alpha Prime. The Blackthorn family has always been loyal to your leadership. See that it stays that way, Kane said. The meeting continued for another hour, with various council members raising concerns about alliances, traditions, and pact protocols. But the energy had shifted. They were no longer dismissing Mira entirely. Now they were watching her, assessing her, trying to figure out what kind of threat or asset she might become. When it finally ended, Mira felt like she'd run a marathon. Her body was still exhausted from the shift, and the mental energy required to hold her ground against hostile council members had drained her completely. As they left the chamber, Kane pulled her aside into a quiet hallway. His hand cupped her cheek, and the worry in his eyes was genuine. That took courage. More than you know. I thought I was going to throw up the entire time, Mira admitted. A slight smile tugged at his lips. That's the secret. We're all terrified. We just can't let them see it. He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers in an intimate gesture that made the bond sing. You did well, Mira. Better than well. You made them see you as more than just a weakness to exploit. But Vanessa. I know. His expression darkened. Iris's warning wasn't empty. Vanessa will retaliate. We need to be prepared. A door opened nearby, and Meredith emerged, her face grim. Kane, we have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves 3 packs formally requesting a trials of worth be held. Kane went completely still. They want to challenge Myra's right to the mate bond. What's a trials of worth? Mira asked, though the sinking feeling in her stomach told her she wasn't going to like the answer. Meredith's expression was sympathetic. It's an ancient tradition. When a mate choice is disputed by multiple packs, they can demand the chosen mate prove their worth through a series of challenges. Combat, strategy, survival skills. It's designed to ensure the Alpha Prime's mate is strong enough to lead. And if I fail? Myra's voice came out barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was answer enough. If she failed the trials of worth, the mate bond could be dissolved by pack law. And Kane would be forced to choose someone else. Someone like Vanessa. Chapter 6. The Storm Before Battle. The trials of worth would be held in 3 days. 3 days to prepare for challenges that had been designed centuries ago to weed out weak mates. 3 days to learn skills that other wolves spent lifetimes mastering. 3 days before Mira would either prove herself worthy or lose everything. The news had spread through the territory like wildfire. By morning, messengers from a dozen packs had arrived at the estate, all with the same gleeful anticipation barely hidden behind formal courtesy. They wanted to watch her fail. Mira stood in the training grounds as dawn broke, her body already aching from the previous day's first shift. Kane stood opposite her, his expression serious but not unkind. We need to understand what you're facing, he said. The trials traditionally consist of 3 challenges. The first is combat. You'll face an opponent chosen by the challenging packs. Usually someone skilled, but not impossible to beat. They want to test you, not murder you outright. Usually, Myra's voice cracked slightly on the word. The second trial tests wisdom and strategy. You'll be given a problem to solve, political, tactical, something that proves you can think like a leader. And the third, he paused. The third is the trial of the wild. You'll be sent into the forest alone, and you'll have to survive and return within a set time frame while being hunted. Hunted. The word came out as a whisper. By volunteers from the challenging packs. They won't kill you. That's forbidden, but they'll try to make you fail. Make you miss the deadline or force you to call for help, which counts as failure. Myra's legs felt weak. Kane, I shifted for the first time yesterday. I can't fight trained warriors. I can't. You can. He crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. Because you have to. Because the alternative is unacceptable. And because I'm going to spend every waking moment of the next 3 days making sure you're as prepared as possible. And if it's not enough, his jaw tightened. Then we fight the ruling. Challenge the trials themselves as archaic and unjust. Which would make you look weak, Mira said quietly. Unwilling to let your mate prove herself. They'd use it against you. I don't care. The intensity in his silver eyes stole her breath. I would burn this entire territory to the ground before I let them take you from me. The bond flared between them, hot and desperate, and Mira felt tears prick her eyes. You barely know me. I know enough. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I know you're stronger than you believe. I know you've survived years of cruelty that would have broken most wolves. I know that when you finally let yourself feel anger yesterday, you shifted in minutes when others struggle for hours. That's not weakness, Mira. That's power you've been forced to suppress. Before she could respond, Meredith appeared at the edge of the training ground, and she wasn't alone. Behind her walked a woman Mira had never seen. Tall, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a severe braid, and scars crisscrossing her muscular arms. This is Sarah, Meredith announced. Former pack enforcer, master of 3 fighting styles, and absolutely terrifying in a fair fight. Sarah's lips twitched into a slight smile. I don't believe in fair fights. That's why I'm still alive. Her sharp eyes assessed Mira with professional interest. So you're the one who has the whole territory in an uproar. You're smaller than I expected. Everyone's smaller than you, Meredith said dryly. True. Sarah circled Mira slowly. But small can be an advantage. Lower center of gravity, harder to grab, can slip through defenses bigger wolves leave open. She stopped in front of Mira. The Alpha Prime says you shifted yesterday. Show me. Mira glanced at Kane, who nodded encouragingly. She closed her eyes, reaching for that place inside where her wolf now waited. It was easier than before. The shift came in a rush of heat and transformation, and then she was on 4 legs, looking up at Sarah through golden wolf eyes. Sarah crouched down, studying her. Interesting. Your wolf is small, yes, but look at those markings. She pointed to the silver patterns on Myra's russet fur. That's not typical coloring. That's moon-touched. Rare. Very rare. Mira shifted back, gasping from the effort. What does that mean? It means your wolf carries gifts beyond simple strength, Sarah said. Speed, agility, possibly enhanced senses or intuition. We'll figure it out as we train. She clapped her hands together. Now, we have 3 days to turn you from a girl who just learned to shift into someone who can survive combat with a trained warrior. No time to waste. What followed was the most grueling 3 days of Myra's life. Sarah was relentless. She drilled Mira in basic combat forms until her muscles screamed. Taught her how to use her smaller size to her advantage. How to dodge instead of block. How to strike at vulnerable points rather than trying to overpower stronger opponents. You'll never win a contest of pure strength, Sarah said as Mira picked herself up from the dirt for the 100th time. So stop trying. You're fast. Faster than you realize. Use that. Make them chase you, tire them out, then strike when they're frustrated and making mistakes. Between combat training, Meredith worked with her on strategy and pack politics. They studied historical problems that had been used in previous trials, practiced negotiation tactics, learned the subtle art of reading opponents for weaknesses. The wisdom trial isn't really about finding the right answer, Meredith explained. It's about showing you can think under pressure, see multiple perspectives, and justify your reasoning. Be confident in your choice, even if you're not certain it's correct. And through it all, Kane was there. He helped her practice shifting until she could do it in seconds instead of minutes. Ran beside her wolf through the forest at night, building her stamina. Sat with her during meals when she was too exhausted to speak, his presence a steady comfort through the bond. On the second night, as Mira lay in her rooms too sore and anxious to sleep, there was a soft knock. Kane entered at her invitation, carrying 2 steaming mugs. Healing tea, he explained, handing her one. Old pack recipe. Helps with muscle pain. They sat together on the balcony, looking out at the moonlit grounds. The trials were tomorrow, and the weight of it pressed down on Mira like a physical thing. I'm terrified, she admitted quietly. I know. He didn't offer false comfort, and she appreciated that. I'm terrified too. You? The Alpha Prime who faces down challenges without flinching. I'm terrified of watching you face danger and not being able to help. Of having to stand by while they put you through trials that could. He stopped, his jaw working. The rules forbid me from interfering. I have to watch. Just watch. And if something goes wrong, if someone decides to bend the rules. Mira reached out and took his hand. The bond hummed between them, and she felt his fear through it, his fierce protectiveness, and underneath it all, something deeper that made her breath catch. Kane, I'm falling in love with you, he said abruptly. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But the bond doesn't care about timing, and neither does my heart. His silver eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. So you need to survive tomorrow. Because I just found you, and I'm not ready to let you go. Tears spilled down Myra's cheeks. I don't know if I can do this. Then don't do it for them. Do it for us. For the life we could have together. He cupped her face, brushing away her tears. Fight for yourself, Mira. For the girl who was never allowed to fight before. Show them what happens when you finally stop holding back. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Mira felt something shift inside her. Not just the bond, though that sang with approval, but something in her own heart, breaking free from years of chains. She kissed him back, pouring all her fear and hope and determination into it, and when they finally broke apart, she felt different. Stronger. I'll fight, she whispered against his lips. For us. For me. I'll fight. The morning of the trials dawned clear and cold. Mira dressed in the clothes Sarah had provided, flexible leather pants, a reinforced tunic, boots designed for both running and fighting. Her hair was braided back tightly, and around her neck, Kane had placed a silver pendant with his family crest. So they remember who you belong to, he'd said, his fingers lingering at her throat. And who will answer for any harm that comes to you. The trials were being held at the ancient Circle of Stones, a neutral ground where pack law held absolute sway. By the time Mira arrived with Kane and Meredith, hundreds of wolves had already gathered. Representatives from every pack in the territory, all come to witness her success or failure. At the center of the circle stood Marcus and 2 other High Council members, there to judge and ensure the rules were followed. And off to one side, looking like a queen surveying her kingdom, stood Vanessa Blackthorne. Their eyes met across the circle, and Vanessa's smile was pure venom. She'd dressed in fighting leathers too, Mira realized with growing dread. Beautiful, deadly, and clearly eager for what was to come. Marcus's voice rang out across the gathering. We are here to witness the trials of worth, called by 3 packs to test the mate claim of Alpha Prime Kane Ashford. Mira Thorne will face 3 challenges. Success in all 3 affirms her right to the bond. Failure in any ends the claim. He turned to Mira. Do you accept these terms? Myra's voice was steady despite her terror. I accept. Then let the first trial begin. Marcus gestured to the circle. Combat. Mira Thorne will face an opponent chosen by the challenging packs. The fight continues until one yields, is incapacitated, or steps outside the circle. A wolf stepped forward from the crowd. A large male with amber eyes and confident swagger. Not impossible to beat, like Kane had said, but certainly not easy. Mira started to step forward, but Marcus held up a hand. One moment. The challenging packs have exercised their right to substitute a champion. Dread pooled in Myra's stomach. Substitute. Someone of equal or lesser rank to the claimant. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral, but Mira saw sympathy flash in his eyes. In this case, another unmated female of similar age and experience. Vanessa Blackthorne stepped into the circle, her smile widening. Hello, Mira. Ready to play? The trap closed. Vanessa wasn't just another fighter. She was one of the best warriors of her generation, trained since childhood, and burning with personal hatred. Kane moved forward, fury radiating from him. This is a violation of nothing, Marcus said quietly. I'm sorry, Alpha Prime. She meets all the technical requirements. The substitution is legal. Mira felt Kane's rage through the bond, felt his desperate need to protect her. She turned to him, and despite her fear, she found herself smiling. It's okay, she said softly. I can do this. She'll try to kill you. She'll try. Mira stepped away from him, into the circle, her eyes never leaving Vanessa's. But I'm not the same girl who sat alone at that ceremony. I'm not invisible anymore. And I'm done being afraid. She shifted, her wolf emerging in a fluid rush, and across the circle, Vanessa's answering shift was equally smooth. Her wolf was larger, silver and white, beautiful and deadly. The crowd fell silent. Marcus raised his hand. Begin. Vanessa lunged, and Myra's real trial began. Chapter 7. Blood and Silver. Vanessa's wolf was a blur of silver and white fury, closing the distance between them in heartbeats. Mira barely dodged the first strike, teeth snapping where her throat had been a moment before. She rolled, came up on her paws, her smaller size allowing her to recover faster. The crowd roared, but Mira blocked it out. All that existed was the circle, the opponent, and the lessons Sarah had drilled into her for 3 days straight. Don't try to match her strength. Use your speed. Make her chase you. Vanessa circled, her silver eyes gleaming with predatory satisfaction. She was toying with Mira, letting the crowd see the size difference, building anticipation for the kill that wasn't allowed but everyone expected anyway. Myra's wolf growled low, and she felt something stir in her chest. Not just fear, but anger. Clean, righteous anger. This wolf had threatened her, had looked at her with contempt, had tried to steal what the moon itself had chosen. Vanessa lunged again, and this time Mira didn't just dodge. She spun beneath the larger wolf's strike and raked her claws across Vanessa's exposed flank. Not deep. She didn't have the weight behind it, but enough to draw first blood. The crowd's roar changed pitch. Shock rippled through the gathering. Vanessa snarled, whirling with fury replacing calculation. Good. Sarah had taught her that too. Angry opponents made mistakes. They crashed together in a tangle of fur and teeth. Vanessa had the advantage in size and strength, but Mira was faster, slipping through holds that should have trapped her, striking at vulnerable points, ears, eyes, the soft tissue of the belly. But Vanessa was trained. Every time Mira thought she had an opening, it closed like a trap. A massive paw caught Myra's shoulder, claws tearing through fur and skin. Pain exploded through her, and she yelped, stumbling. Vanessa pressed the advantage, slamming into Mira with her full weight. Myra's smaller body hit the ground hard, and suddenly Vanessa's jaws were at her throat, teeth pressing against the vital veins there. One bite. That's all it would take. Through the bond, Mira felt Kane's terror, his rage, his desperate need to intervene. But he couldn't. The rules forbade it. Vanessa's wolf was trembling with the effort of not biting down. The message was clear. I could kill you right now. Yield, or I'll come as close as the rules allow. But yielding meant losing Kane. Meant going back to being nothing, no one, invisible and broken. And Mira had meant what she said. She was done being afraid. Her wolf reached for something deep inside, that place where the bond connected her to Kane. And through that connection, she felt his wolf respond. Felt the surge of his power, his strength, flowing through the mate bond like lightning through a wire. Silver light exploded from Myra's body. Vanessa yelped, jerking back as if burned. The light wasn't physical. It was pure energy, the manifestation of a mate bond at its strongest. Moon-touched, Sarah had called Myra's coloring. This was what that meant. Mira didn't question it. She attacked. She moved like liquid silver, faster than she'd ever moved before. Her strikes weren't powerful, but they were precise, relentless. She targeted every vulnerable point Sarah had shown her. The nose, the ears, the joints. Death by 1,000 cuts. Vanessa tried to rally, but she'd expected an easy victory. Expected Mira to crumble under pressure. Instead, she faced a wolf who had everything to lose and absolutely nothing to prove except that she deserved to exist. Myra's jaws closed on Vanessa's foreleg, and she wrenched sideways with all her strength. Bone didn't break, but something popped, a joint dislocating. Vanessa's howl of pain echoed across the circle. The larger wolf stumbled, favoring the injured leg, and Mira saw her opening. She launched herself at Vanessa's exposed throat, her teeth finding purchase, pressing down just enough to make the threat real. Yield. The thought pushed through the haze of battle. Yield and live. Fight and risk everything. For a long moment, Vanessa's wolf struggled, pride and hatred warring with survival instinct. Then finally she went limp, the universal sign of submission. Mira held the position for 3 more heartbeats, making sure everyone saw, making sure they understood. Then she released Vanessa and stepped back. Marcus's voice rang out. The challenger yields. Mira Thorne wins the first trial. The crowd erupted. Some in celebration, some in shock, some in clear disappointment. Mira shifted back to human form, gasping and bleeding but standing. Across the circle, Vanessa shifted too, clutching her injured arm, her face twisted with humiliation and rage. Their eyes met. There was no apology in Vanessa's gaze. Only a promise, this isn't over. Kane was there instantly, wrapping a cloak around Myra's naked form, his hands checking her wounds with desperate urgency. You're bleeding. You need a healer. I'm fine, Mira said, though the adrenaline was starting to fade and everything hurt. How long until the next trial? You have 1 hour to rest and heal, Marcus said, approaching them. There was something in his expression, not quite approval, but definitely reassessment. I'll be honest, girl. I didn't think you'd win that. Vanessa Blackthorne is one of our best warriors. Was I not supposed to? Mira asked, too exhausted for politeness. A slight smile crossed Marcus's weathered face. The trials are meant to test you, not execute you. But Vanessa clearly had personal motivations. You handled yourself well. As Marcus walked away, Meredith rushed forward with healing supplies and a flask of something that smelled medicinal. Drink this. It'll help with the pain and speed your healing. Mira drank, wincing at the bitter taste. The shoulder wound where Vanessa had caught her was deep, but already the bleeding was slowing. Whatever was in the flask was working. 1 trial down, she said quietly. 2 to go. The wisdom trial next, Kane said, his arm around her shoulders, steadying her. And then the hunt. His jaw was tight with tension. You don't have to do this, Mira. We can refuse the remaining trials, challenge the ruling. And look weak. Give them what they want. Mira shook her head. I won the first trial. I'm seeing this through. Sarah appeared, carrying fresh clothes. That was good work in there. You used the bond. That silver light. That's advanced technique. Most mated pairs take years to learn how to channel power through the bond like that. I didn't know what I was doing, Mira admitted. I just reached for him. Instinct. Sarah helped her into the clothes. Another set of leather fighting gear, this time with reinforced shoulders. Trust it. Your wolf knows things your human mind hasn't learned yet. The hour passed too quickly. Myra's wounds had healed to manageable levels. Still painful, but no longer bleeding. The healing tea and whatever supernatural resilience came with being wolf-kind had worked faster than she'd expected. When Marcus called her back to the circle, a large table had been set up in the center. On it lay a map of the territory, markers representing different packs, and what looked like reports of some kind. The second trial, Marcus announced. Wisdom and strategy. You will be presented with a problem facing our territory. You must propose a solution and defend your reasoning before the council and assembled packs. Mira approached the table, her heart hammering. Combat she could handle. It was physical, instinctive. But this required knowledge she didn't have, experience she'd never gained. Marcus gestured to the map. The situation. 3 packs along our western border have been reporting increased rogue activity. Lone wolves, some violent, crossing into pack territory. They're avoiding patrols, hitting small settlements, stealing resources. Traditional responses, increased patrols, harsher punishments, have failed. The violence is escalating. As the Alpha Prime's mate, what do you recommend? Mira studied the map, her mind racing. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, waiting for her to fail, waiting to confirm that she was just a half-blood girl who'd gotten lucky in a fight. She looked at the markers, looked at the reports, and then she looked at what wasn't there. Where are the rogues coming from? She asked. Excuse me. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The reports show where they're attacking, but not where they're originating. Rogues don't just appear. They come from somewhere, packs they've left or been expelled from, territories where they can't survive. She pointed to the map. These 3 packs are all near the Deadlands, right? The territory that was destroyed in the Great Fire 5 years ago. Yes, Marcus said slowly. But the Deadlands are uninhabitable. Nothing survives there. Then why are rogues coming from that direction? Mira looked up at him. Maybe they're not rogues at all. Maybe they're survivors. Wolves who lost everything in the fire and have been trying to survive in impossible conditions. Of course they're desperate. Of course they're stealing. They're starving. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some dismissive, some thoughtful. So what do you propose? Marcus asked. We simply allow them to raid our territory? No. I propose we give them a reason not to. Myra's voice grew stronger. The Deadlands border is huge. These 3 packs can't patrol it all effectively. So instead of fighting the survivors, we offer them sanctuary. We give them a choice. Join one of the border packs as full members, follow our laws, and they'll be protected and fed. Or continue raiding and face the full force of United Pack justice. You want to reward criminals, someone from the crowd called out. I want to solve the problem, Mira countered. You've been trying force for months. It's not working. These wolves are desperate enough to risk death. Maybe they need hope instead of threats. And if they refuse, if they keep raiding, this from Iris Blackthorn, her voice sharp. Then we've established they're true rogues, not survivors, and we respond with appropriate force. But at least we'll know we tried something other than violence first. Mira met Iris's gaze steadily. Isn't that what Pack is supposed to be about? Offering shelter to those who need it? Or do we only extend that mercy to wolves with the right bloodlines? The challenge in her words was clear. The criticism of how she'd been treated her whole life. Silence fell over the gathering. Marcus studied her with intense focus. Interesting. Compassionate but not naive. You acknowledge the potential for continued threat. He turned to the other council members. Thoughts? The discussion that followed was heated. Some agreed with Myra's approach. Others called it weakness. But the important thing was they were discussing it, treating her proposal as legitimate, not just dismissing her outright. Finally, Marcus raised his hand for silence. The purpose of this trial is not to find the perfect answer, but to assess the claimant's ability to think strategically and defend her reasoning under pressure. Mira Thorne has done both. He looked at her. You passed the second trial. Relief flooded through Mira, so intense her knees nearly buckled. 2 down. 1 to go. But the third trial was the most dangerous. The hunt. You have 30 minutes, Marcus said. Then you enter the forest. You must survive until sunset and return to this circle. Hunters from the challenging packs will be pursuing you. They cannot kill you, but they can do everything short of that to prevent your return. If you call for help, yield, or fail to return by sunset, you fail the trial. He paused, his expression grave. And Mira, some of those hunters won't care much about the rules. Watch your back. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Mira stood at the edge of the forest, preparing for the final test. Kane stood beside her, his hand gripping hers so tightly it almost hurt. I'll be listening through the bond, he said urgently. If anything goes wrong, if they try to truly harm you, I'm coming in, rules be damned. That would invalidate the trial. I don't care. His silver eyes blazed. Your life is worth more than their traditions. Mira stood on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt through the bond. I know, and I love you for it, but I'm going to survive this. And when I come back, we're going to build the life you promised me. Marcus's voice called out. Time. Enter the forest, Mira Thorne. May the moon guide you. Mira shifted, her wolf emerging smoothly now, almost eager. She looked back once at Kane, at Meredith, at Sarah, at the life waiting on the other side of this final trial. Then she turned and ran into the forest, and the hunt began. Chapter 8. The Hunter and the Hunted. The forest swallowed Mira whole. Ancient trees towered overhead, their canopy so thick that even midday felt like twilight. Her wolf's senses sharpened immediately. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, every shift in the wind carrying information. She could smell the damp earth, the moss, the small prey animals scurrying through the underbrush. And she could smell wolves. Multiple wolves. Her hunters. The rules gave her a 30-minute head start before they entered the forest. Not much time, but enough if she used it wisely. Mira ran, not in a straight line but in a zigzag pattern Sarah had taught her, disrupting her scent trail. She crossed through streams when she found them, splashed through muddy patches, anything to make tracking her harder. Her shoulders still ached where Vanessa had torn into her, but the pain was manageable. She pushed it aside and focused on survival. The forest was vast. She'd studied maps during her preparation. If she headed northeast, she'd reach a rocky area where her scent would be even harder to track. From there, she could circle back toward the circle of stones, approaching from an unexpected direction. A howl echoed through the trees. The hunters had entered the forest. Myra's heart hammered, but she didn't panic. She adjusted her course, moving faster now, using her smaller size to slip through dense undergrowth that larger wolves would have to go around. Her moon-touched markings seemed to shimmer in the dim forest light, and she wondered if that would make her easier to spot. Another howl, closer this time. They were spreading out, trying to box her in. Think, Mira. Think like they taught you. The hunters would expect her to run straight for the circle. So she wouldn't. She'd find a place to hide, let them pass, then double back. It was risky. If they found her hiding spot, she'd be trapped. But running blindly until sunset would exhaust her, and tired prey made mistakes. She found what she was looking for, a hollowed-out space beneath the roots of a massive old tree, hidden by thick ferns. Mira squeezed into the space, her smaller wolf form just barely fitting, and went completely still. The bond hummed in her chest, and through it, she felt Kane's anxiety. He was pacing back at the circle, she knew, fighting every instinct to come after her. She pushed a feeling of reassurance through the bond. I'm okay. I'm being smart. His response was immediate, a surge of warmth and fierce protectiveness that made her wolf want to curl up and purr despite the danger. Footsteps. Heavy paws hitting the forest floor at speed. 3 wolves burst through the underbrush not 20 feet from Myra's hiding spot. All large, all moving with the confidence of trained hunters. They paused, sniffing the air, and Mira held her breath, pressing herself deeper into the roots. Lost the scent, one of them said. Wolves in shifted form could communicate through a combination of body language and a sort of mental projection. She came this way, then nothing. Check the streams, another responded. She's probably trying to mask her trail. They moved on, and Mira waited until their scents faded before emerging. Her plan had worked. Now to. A low growl froze her in place. Mira turned slowly. A 4th hunter stood behind her, having circled back while the others searched ahead. And this wolf she recognized, the ambitious young counselor from the meeting. His eyes gleamed with triumph. Found you, he projected, moving to block her escape route. Now we see if you're as resourceful as you pretended to be. He lunged. Mira dodged, but not quite fast enough. His jaws closed on her hind leg, not breaking but holding, dragging her backward. She twisted, snapping at his face, forcing him to release her. She ran. Behind her, she heard his howl, alerting the others. Now all 4 hunters would converge on her position. The careful plan evaporated. This was pure survival now. Mira pushed her wolf to its limits, racing through the forest with desperate speed. She could hear them behind her, multiple sets of paws, coordinating their pursuit. They were hurting her, she realized, pushing her away from the direction of the circle, deeper into the forest where she'd have farther to travel at sunset. A cliff face loomed ahead. She hadn't expected to reach the rocky area this quickly. No time to go around. Mira gathered herself and leaped, her claws scrabbling for purchase on the stone. Her injured shoulder screamed in protest, but she pulled herself up, scrambling onto a narrow ledge. The hunters reached the bottom of the cliff. The ambitious counselor snarled up at her. Clever, but you can't stay up there forever. Sunset's still hours away. He was right. She was trapped on a ledge with no clear way forward and 4 wolves waiting below. If she tried to climb down, they'd be on her instantly. Mira looked up. The cliff continued higher, but the handholds were treacherous. Still, it was her only option. She began to climb in her wolf form, something that should have been impossible. But her moon-touched agility made it almost manageable. Almost. Her injured leg gave out on a difficult stretch. She slipped, claws scraping against stone, and for a terrifying moment she was falling. Her jaws clamped onto a protruding root. She hung there, dangling over the drop, her pursuers directly below. One good shake of her head, and she'd fall right into their waiting jaws. Through the bond, she felt Kane's terror spike. He'd felt her fear, her desperation. She pushed back calmness she didn't feel, trying to keep him from breaking the rules to save her. Using strength she didn't know she had, Mira swung her body, got her back paws against the cliff face, and pushed off while releasing the root. She flew through the air, clearing the heads of the startled hunters below, and landed in a painful roll on the forest floor behind them. Before they could recover from their surprise, she was running again. But she couldn't keep this up. Her leg was injured now, her shoulder was bleeding again, and exhaustion was setting in. She needed a different strategy. The forest opened into a clearing, and Mira skidded to a stop. In the center of the clearing was an old stone structure. The ruins of what must have been a shrine to the moon goddess, abandoned decades ago. Crumbling walls, a partially collapsed roof, but most importantly multiple exits. Mira shifted to human form. It was faster than her wolf right now, and scrambled into the ruins. She could use this. Make them come to her one at a time, in a confined space where numbers mattered less. The hunters burst into the clearing and stopped, seeing her in human form in the ruins. Smart enough to recognize a trap, the ambitious counselor shifted to human as well. You're cornered, little half-blood. You can't win. Just yield, and we'll let you rest. No shame in knowing when you're beaten. There's shame in giving up when I haven't lost yet, Mira called back, her voice steadier than she felt. Sunset's still 3 hours away. That's a long time. Long enough for you to bleed out from those wounds, he countered. We don't have to attack you. We just have to wait for you to collapse. He wasn't wrong. But Mira had one advantage they didn't expect. She closed her eyes and reached through the bond. Not for comfort this time, but for power. For the same silver light that had saved her against Vanessa. Kane's wolf rose to meet hers, and their bond blazed like a star. Silver energy exploded from Myra's body, radiating outward in a pulse that made all 4 hunters stagger back. It wasn't an attack. It was a shield, a declaration of power that said, I am not prey. I am the mate of the Alpha Prime, and I will not fall. The ambitious counselor's confidence wavered. That's not possible. You only bonded days ago. That kind of power takes years. Maybe for you, Mira said, and she was smiling now despite the pain, despite the exhaustion. But I'm moon-touched. Sarah said it herself. I'm different. She shifted back to wolf form, the transformation flowing like water. And when she emerged, the silver markings on her russet fur were glowing with that same otherworldly light. The hunters looked at each other uncertainly. This wasn't the easy target they'd expected. Mira didn't wait for them to rally. She burst from the ruins at a dead sprint, heading straight for the one exit they'd left unguarded. One tried to intercept her, but the silver light flared and he veered away instinctively, not wanting to touch that power. She was through their line and running again. But this time she wasn't just fleeing. She was leading them on a chase that burned their energy, while she rationed hers. The silver light faded. She couldn't maintain it forever, but it had bought her precious time and momentum. The forest blurred around her. Her wolf's instincts took over, finding the fastest paths, the safest routes. And through the bond, she felt Kane pacing her, his strength flowing to her when she needed it most. The sun began its descent toward the horizon. Hours had passed in a blur of chase and hide, attack and escape. Mira was running on pure determination now, her body screaming for rest, but the circle of stones was close. She could feel it. One final obstacle emerged, a deep ravine, too wide to jump, with a raging river far below. The only way across was a fallen tree, ancient and half-rotted, serving as a natural bridge. Behind her, the hunters were closing in for one last push. Mira didn't hesitate. She shifted to human. 2 legs would be steadier on the narrow bridge, and ran across the fallen tree. Halfway across, the wood groaned ominously. 3/4, and a section cracked beneath her foot. She leaped the final distance just as the tree gave way, crashing into the ravine below. The hunters reached the edge and stopped, unable to follow. The ambitious counselor shifted to human, breathing hard. Impressive, he called across the gap. But you still have to reach the circle before sunset. And you're exhausted. He was right. But the circle was so close now. Just through this final stretch of forest. Mira ran, her human legs carrying her toward home, toward Kane, toward the life she was fighting so hard to claim. The trees thinned. She could see the circle of stones ahead, see the gathered crowd, see Kane standing at the edge, his body taut with tension as he watched for her return. The sun touched the horizon, beginning its final descent. Mira staggered into the clearing, her legs giving out as she crossed into the sacred circle. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. She'd done it. Marcus's voice rang out, filled with something that might have been awe. Mira Thorne returns before sunset. She has survived the hunt. He paused, looking around at the assembled packs. All 3 trials are complete. All 3 trials passed. By ancient law and pack tradition, Mira Thorne's claim to the mate bond is affirmed. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered, some looked disappointed, some simply stared in disbelief. But it didn't matter, because Kane was there, dropping to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms with desperate relief. You did it, he breathed against her hair. You survived. You won. We won, Mira corrected weakly, leaning into his warmth. I couldn't have done it without you. Without the bond. The bond chose well. Kane said, and there was such fierce pride in his voice. You're stronger than any of them will ever understand. As the sun set completely, casting the circle of stones in twilight, Mira looked up at the gathered wolves, at the packs who had doubted her, at Vanessa Blackthorne, standing at the edge of the crowd with fury and grudging respect warring in her expression. She'd proven herself. Not to them, she didn't need their approval, but to herself. The half-blood girl who couldn't shift was gone. In her place stood Mira Thorne, mate to the Alpha Prime, moon-touched wolf, and survivor of the trials of Worth. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 9. The Price of Victory. The healing wing of the Ashford estate was quiet, lit by soft moonlight filtering through tall windows. Mira lay in a bed far more comfortable than the one in her guest rooms, her wounds being tended by the pack's chief healer, a stern-faced woman named Talia who worked with efficient precision. You're lucky, Talia said, spreading a salve that smelled of herbs and magic across Myra's shoulder. Another inch and Vanessa's claws would have severed the tendon. You'd have lost use of the arm. Doesn't feel lucky, Mira said, wincing as the medicine burned before cooling into blessed relief. Luck is surviving when you shouldn't have. Talia wrapped the wound with clean bandages. That's 3 times today you should have died or been too injured to continue. Yet here you are, battered but whole. I'd call that lucky. Kane stood by the window, his back rigid with tension. He hadn't left her side since she'd collapsed in the circle. Through the bond, Mira could feel his emotions churning, relief, pride, and underneath it all, a deep seething anger. Kane, she said softly. I'm okay. He turned to face her, and the fury in his silver eyes made her breath catch. They nearly killed you. Multiple times. The ambitious counselor went for your leg deliberately, trying to cripple you. The tree bridge was unstable. They must have known it wouldn't hold. And the rules that were supposed to protect you, were bent as far as they could be bent. Talia finished, her voice grim. I've seen the trials before. Never have I seen hunters be so aggressive. This was personal. It was Vanessa, Mira said. She wanted revenge for the first trial. She probably convinced the others to push harder than they normally would have. Which is why she's currently being questioned by Marcus and the High Council, Kane said, his voice hard. Along with the ambitious counselor and anyone else who might have conspired to harm you beyond what the trials allowed. A knock at the door interrupted them. Meredith entered, her usually composed face showing signs of strain. The council wants to speak with you both. There's been a development. Kane's jaw tightened. What kind of development? The kind where Vanessa Blackthorne is claiming that Mira used forbidden magic during the trials. That the silver light she manifested is evidence of dark witchcraft, not mate bond power. Myra's stomach dropped. That's insane. The bond is real. Everyone felt it. They know it's real, Meredith said. But Vanessa is arguing that the intensity of the power is unnatural for such a new bond. She's planted seeds of doubt, and some of the more traditional council members are listening. Of course they are, Kane growled. They want any excuse to invalidate the trials, to prove that Mira somehow cheated her way through them. Talia finished bandaging Myra's wounds and stepped back. You're healed enough to move, but you need rest. A full day at minimum before any strenuous activity. I don't think we have a day, Mira said, pushing herself to sit up despite the protests from her body. If we wait, if we let them build this narrative, it'll only get worse. Kane moved to her side immediately. You just survived 3 death trials. You're not facing the council again tonight. Yes, I am. Mira met his eyes steadily. Because if I hide now, if I let you fight this battle for me, it proves exactly what they want to believe. That I'm weak, that I need protection, that I'm not fit to be your mate. I won the trials, Kane. I'm not going to lose the victory because I was too tired to defend it. She saw the conflict in his expression. The desperate need to protect her warring with respect for her strength. Finally, he nodded. Then we face them together. But if they push too far, if they try to harm you again, then we'll handle it, Mira said, taking his hand. Together. 20 minutes later, they stood in the council chamber once more. This time, the atmosphere was even more hostile than before. The seats around the table were full, and standing at the center was Vanessa Blackthorne, her injured arm in a sling, her expression a perfect mask of wounded innocence. Ah, the victor arrives, Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. How convenient. Now we can clear up this unfortunate misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Marcus said from his position at the head of the table. His expression was carefully neutral, but Mira thought she saw sympathy in his eyes. You've made serious accusations, Vanessa. Accusations that, if proven false, carry their own consequences. I'm aware, Vanessa said smoothly, which is why I'm confident in my claims. During both the combat trial and the hunt, Mira manifested silver energy. Power far beyond what any newly bonded mate should possess. The only explanation is that she's been using forbidden enhancement magic. Blood magic, perhaps. Or worse. That's ridiculous, Mira said, anger giving her strength. The silver light came from the mate bond, from the connection between Kane and myself. A connection that shouldn't be that strong yet, Iris Blackthorne interjected. Her eyes were cold and calculating. I've been mated for 30 years, and I still can't channel power through my bond the way you demonstrated. It takes decades to develop that kind of connection. You've been bonded for days. Unless she's moon-touched. Sarah's voice came from the back of the chamber. She strode forward, her scarred arms crossed, which I identified during training. Her wolf carries the markings. The gifts. It's rare, but not unheard of. Convenient, Vanessa sneered. An excuse prepared in advance, no doubt. Watch your tone. Kane's voice was deadly quiet. You're already on thin ice, Vanessa. Making accusations is one thing. Calling my mate a liar is quite another. Then let her prove it, Iris said. If the power is natural, if it comes from the bond and not from forbidden magic, surely she can demonstrate it under controlled conditions. With witnesses. With healers present to test for magical corruption. It was another trap. Mira could see it clearly. If she refused, they'd use it as evidence of guilt. If she agreed and failed to manifest the power, which she might, since it had come from desperation and need during the trials, they'd claim she'd exhausted her illicit magic source. I agree, Mira said, and felt Kane's shock through the bond. But on one condition. When I prove the power is natural, Vanessa faces consequences for these false accusations. She tried to kill me in the combat trial. She orchestrated an unusually aggressive hunt. And now she's attempting to invalidate legitimate trial results through baseless claims. That's not honorable challenge. That's malicious persecution. The chamber went silent. No one had expected Mira to go on the offensive. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying both women with interest. Bold. You're willing to stake everything on this demonstration. I am, Mira said. Because I have nothing to hide. Very well. Marcus gestured to an open space in the center of the chamber. Show us this bond power. Now, if it's genuine, the healers will be able to confirm it carries no taint of dark magic. Mira walked to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. Kane followed, standing beside her, his presence a steady anchor through the bond. I need you, she said quietly, just for him. I can't do this alone. You're never alone, he replied, taking her hands in his. We're bonded, Mira. Your strength is my strength. Your power is my power. What flows between us is as natural as breathing. She closed her eyes and reached for that place inside where the bond lived, that golden thread connecting her soul to his. It was there, strong and steady, humming with potential. She pulled on it, and Kane's wolf rose to meet hers, their energies intertwining. The silver light began to glow beneath their joined hands. It started small, just a shimmer, but as their connection deepened, it grew. Silver energy spiraled up their arms, wrapping around their bodies like living light. It was beautiful, not harsh or corrupted, but pure and bright as moonlight. The healers moved forward immediately, their hands glowing with diagnostic magic. Mira held still as they examined the energy, tested it, analyzed every aspect of its nature. After a long moment, Talia spoke. There's no corruption, no foreign magic, no blood price or dark bargaining. She looked at Marcus. This is pure mate bond energy, amplified by what appears to be a moon blessing. Rare, but absolutely natural. The silver light faded as Mira and Kane released the connection, both breathing hard from the effort. Mira turned to face Vanessa, whose perfect mask had finally cracked into undisguised fury. Your accusations are baseless, Marcus said, his voice ringing with authority. The power is natural, verified by multiple witnesses and healers. Mira Thorne passed the trials of worth legitimately, and her bond with the Alpha Prime is genuine. This isn't over, Vanessa started. It is. Kane's voice cut through her protest like a blade. You have made false accusations. You have attempted to harm my mate through manipulation of trial rules. You have shown nothing but dishonor and malice. By pack law, I could challenge your families standing in the territory for this. Iris stood abruptly. Alpha Prime, surely we can resolve this without. Sit down, Iris. Marcus's command was sharp. Your daughter has brought shame to the Blackthorn name. Be grateful the Alpha Prime is showing restraint. He turned to Vanessa. You are hereby stripped of the title of pack champion. Your family will pay reparations to Mira Thorne for the harm attempted during the trials. And you will publicly apologize before the assembled packs. I will not. Vanessa's protest died as Marcus's power filled the room, making the air heavy and hard to breathe. You will, Marcus said quietly, or your entire family will face sanctions. Your choice. The hatred in Vanessa's eyes as she looked at Mira was a living thing, but she bowed her head. I apologize for my accusations. They were unfounded. It was the least sincere apology Mira had ever heard, but it was public, and it was on record. That was what mattered. This matter is closed, Marcus declared. Mira Thorne's position as the Alpha Prime's mate is confirmed and will not be challenged again. Any wolf who attempts further harassment will answer directly to me. As the council chamber emptied, Mira felt the last of her adrenaline drain away. She swayed, and Kane caught her immediately, lifting her into his arms despite her weak protests. You need rest, he said firmly. Real rest. No more trials, no more challenges, no more proving yourself. For how long? Mira asked, only half joking. For at least tonight. He carried her out of the chamber, through the corridors, back toward her rooms. Tomorrow we start building the life we fought for. But tonight you sleep. And I keep watch. You don't have to. I want to. His silver eyes met hers, and the emotion in them made her chest ache. I almost lost you today. Multiple times. So tonight, I need to know you're safe. That you're here. That this is real. Mira reached up and cupped his cheek. It's real. We're real. And I'm not going anywhere. He carried her to her rooms and laid her gently on the bed. True to his word, he settled into a chair by the window, positioned where he could see both the door and the bed, watching over her. As exhaustion finally claimed her, Myra's last thought was that she'd done it. She'd survived. She'd proven herself. And tomorrow, her real life would begin. Chapter 10, Building a Future. Dawn broke soft and golden over the Ashford estate. Mira woke slowly, her body still aching but infinitely better than the night before. The healing sleep and her wolf's natural resilience had worked wonders. The deep wounds were now pink scars, and the bone-deep exhaustion had faded to manageable tiredness. She turned her head and found Kane exactly where he'd been when she fell asleep. In the chair by the window, though now his eyes were closed, his head tilted back in restless sleep. Even unconscious, his body remained alert, ready to wake at the slightest threat. Mira slipped out of bed quietly and padded over to him. In sleep, the hard edges of his face softened slightly, making him look younger. She could see traces of the boy he must have been before his mother's death forced him to become a man too quickly. Gently, she touched his shoulder. His eyes snapped open immediately, silver and alert, and for a moment he looked disoriented. Then he focused on her, and relief flooded his expression. You're awake. How do you feel? Better. She offered him a hand. Come on. If you're going to watch over me, at least do it from a comfortable bed instead of a chair that's giving you a neck cramp. A slight smile tugged at his lips. I can feel the cramp through the bond. I can feel everything through the bond. Mira pulled him to his feet, including the fact that you haven't really slept in days. She led him to the bed. Their bed, she realized, since these rooms were meant for both of them now. He hesitated at the edge, and she could feel his uncertainty through their connection. They were mated, yes, but they'd barely had time to explore what that meant beyond survival and trials. Just sleep, she said softly, climbing back under the covers. We're both exhausted. Everything else can wait. He settled beside her carefully, maintaining a respectful distance, but Mira wasn't having it. She moved closer, resting her head on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. After a moment, his arm came around her, holding her securely. I was terrified, he admitted quietly, watching you in those trials, feeling your pain and fear through the bond but unable to help. It was the most powerless I've ever felt. But I survived. We survived. This time. His voice was rough with emotion. But there will be other threats, Mira. Other wolves who see you as a weakness to exploit. Other challenges we'll have to face. And I don't know if I can go through that again, watching you suffer while I stand by helplessly. Mira lifted her head to look at him. Then we make sure I'm never helpless. We keep training. We keep getting stronger. Together. She traced the line of his jaw. You said I was stronger than I knew. Help me become stronger than they can imagine. You already are. But she saw the resolve in his eyes. He would train with her, teach her, make sure she could defend herself against anything. Not because he thought she was weak, but because he couldn't bear to lose her. They lay there as the morning light grew stronger. No longer exhausted prey and desperate protector, but simply two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and were beginning to understand what that meant. Eventually, hunger drove them from the bed. They dressed, Mira in simple clothes that didn't pull at her healing wounds, and made their way to the private dining room. Meredith was already there, along with Sarah, both looking unusually serious. We need to discuss what comes next, Meredith said without preamble. The trials are over, yes, but that doesn't mean the challenges are. You've made powerful enemies, Mira. The Blackthorns won't forget this humiliation. Let them remember, Kane said coldly. Let everyone remember what happens when they underestimate my mate. Noble sentiment, Sarah said, but Meredith's right. Vanessa was publicly shamed, stripped of her title, forced to apologize. That kind of humiliation breeds dangerous resentment. She looked at Mira. You need to be ready for retaliation. Not through official challenges. Marcus shut that door, but through subtler means. What kind of means? Mira asked, taking a seat at the table. Political maneuvering, Meredith said. Social sabotage. Undermining your position through gossip and manipulation. The Blackthorns are connected to half the influential families in the territory. They could make your life here very difficult if they choose to. Then we build our own alliances, Mira said. We show the other packs that I'm not just a novelty or a weakness, that I can be an asset. Exactly. Meredith smiled approvingly. Which brings me to my next point. There's a gathering in 2 weeks, the Autumn Moon Festival. Every major pack sends representatives. It's part celebration, part political networking, part showing off. Traditionally, the Alpha Prime attends with his mate. She paused meaningfully. It would be your first public appearance as Kane's confirmed mate. Mira felt her stomach clench. Another trial, just a different kind. And if I mess up, say the wrong thing to the wrong Alpha, make us look weak. Then we handle it, Kane said firmly. But you won't mess up. You stood before the council and called out their hypocrisy. You passed 3 death trials. You can handle a party. A party where everyone will be watching my every move, looking for mistakes, judging whether I belong. Mira looked down at her hands. At least in the trials, the enemies were obvious. Which is why we'll prepare you, Meredith said. We have 2 weeks to teach you everything you need to know about pack social dynamics, influential families, and how to navigate high-level politics without stepping on dangerous toes. More lessons, Mira said, but there was no real complaint in her voice. Just acceptance. This was her life now. Constant learning, constant proving herself, constant vigilance. Not just lessons, Sarah added. More training too. You've learned to fight and survive. Now you need to learn to look like you belong in this world. Posture, presence, the way you carry yourself. Small things that make a big difference in how others perceive you. Over the next 2 weeks, Myra's life became a carefully structured routine. Mornings with Sarah, drilling combat forms, and working on the confident bearing of a pack leader's mate. Afternoons with Meredith, studying family trees and political alliances, learning the subtle art of conversation that said much while revealing little. And evenings with Kane, where they worked on the bond itself, learning to communicate through it more clearly, to sense each other's emotions and intent, to channel power together with increasing control. The bond is your greatest strength, Kane explained one evening as they practiced in the training grounds. But it's also a vulnerability. Strong emotions can bleed through without control, revealing things you might want to keep hidden. We need to teach you to shield when necessary, to control what others can sense through your connection to me. They stood facing each other, the bond thrumming between them. Mira closed her eyes and tried to visualize a barrier around her emotions. Not cutting off the bond, but filtering it, controlling the flow. Good, Kane murmured. Now open it again. Let me feel everything. She dropped the shield, and the full force of their connection rushed back. His pride in her progress. His lingering fear from the trials. His growing love, deep and fierce, and still a little terrifying in its intensity. And from her side, he must have felt her own emotions. Her gratitude for his patience, her wonder at this new life, and yes, the love that was blooming despite everything that had happened. Their eyes met, and suddenly the training felt less important than the simple fact of being together. Cain crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and kissed her, deep and claiming, and Mira melted into it. This was what they'd fought for. Not just the right to be together, but the chance to actually be together, to build something beyond mere survival. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cain rested his forehead against hers. 2 weeks ago, I was a king with walls around his heart, convinced he'd never find a true connection. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. 2 weeks ago, I was a girl in an attic who'd convinced herself she was worthless, Mira replied. Now I'm standing here with the most powerful alpha in 3 territories, and I'm not afraid of him. I'm not afraid of myself. That's the real gift you've given me, not protection, but the chance to discover my own strength. You always had the strength. I just gave you permission to use it. The night before the Autumn Moon Festival, Mira stood in her rooms while Elena and 2 other attendants helped her into a gown that made her breath catch. It was deep midnight blue, almost black, with silver thread woven through it that caught the light like stars. The design was elegant but strong, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirts that wouldn't impede movement if she needed to fight. You look like a queen, Elena said softly, pinning Myra's hair into an intricate style that somehow looked both delicate and fierce. Mira barely recognized herself in the mirror. The girl in the mud-colored dress was gone. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged beside an Alpha Prime. But looks were deceiving, and Mira knew the real test would come tomorrow when she had to prove she was more than just a pretty face in a beautiful dress. Cain appeared in the doorway, already dressed in formal black and silver, and his expression when he saw her made her heart skip. You're stunning. I'm terrified, she admitted. Then we'll be terrified together. He held out his hand. But remember, you've already survived worse than a political gathering. You've faced death trials and won. You've stood against the council and held your ground. You've earned the right to walk into that festival with your head high. Mira took his hand, feeling the bond pulse with warmth and reassurance. Together, she said. Always. As they stood there in the moonlight, dressed for tomorrow's challenges, Mira realized something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She wasn't just enduring or proving herself. She was actually starting to believe she belonged here, that she deserved this, that the moon hadn't made a mistake when it bound her to Cain. And tomorrow, at the Autumn Moon Festival, she would show the entire territory exactly what the Alpha Prime's mate was capable of. Chapter 11. The Autumn Moon Festival. The festival grounds were transformed into something from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. Hundreds of lanterns floated overhead, their light warm and golden against the darkening sky. Tables laden with food stretched in every direction, and a massive bonfire burned in the center of it all, reaching toward the stars. Wolves from every major pack in the territory mingled in their finest clothes, their laughter and conversation creating a constant hum of noise. Myra's hand tightened on Cain's arm as they approached the entrance. She could feel eyes turning toward them, conversations pausing mid-sentence as the Alpha Prime arrived with his controversial mate. Breathe, Cain murmured, too quietly for anyone else to hear. You look magnificent. You belong here. Remember that. They made their entrance together, and a hush fell over the nearest section of the crowd. Then someone started clapping. Marcus, she realized with surprise, standing near the bonfire with a goblet in his hand. Others joined in, the applause spreading, though Mira couldn't tell how much was genuine respect versus political necessity. Alpha Prime, Marcus called out, his voice carrying. Welcome, and welcome to you as well, Mira Thorne. Your performance in the trials has become the talk of the territory. I imagine it has, Mira replied, keeping her voice steady and her head high the way Meredith had taught her. Though I hope the rest of tonight provides more pleasant topics of conversation. A ripple of laughter went through the nearby wolves. Good, she'd struck the right tone. Acknowledging the past without dwelling on it, showing confidence without arrogance. As they moved deeper into the festival, wolves approached to offer congratulations or simply to assess her up close. Mira fielded questions with practiced grace, using phrases Meredith had drilled into her, deflecting anything too personal or politically charged. Your heritage is unusual. one older alpha remarked, his tone carefully neutral. Half human, I understand? My mother was human, yes, Mira said, meeting his gaze directly. Though my wolf seems to have no complaints about the arrangement. A few nearby wolves chuckled, and she felt the tension ease slightly. Kane's presence beside her was a constant anchor. Whenever a conversation grew too pointed or a wolf pushed too hard, his subtle shift in posture or the slight tightening of his expression was enough to make them back off. He was protecting her without overshadowing her, and she was grateful for the balance. They were halfway through the evening when Mira spotted Vanessa across the bonfire. The Blackthorn daughter stood with a group of young wolves, all beautiful and powerful, all watching Mira with varying degrees of hostility and curiosity. Their eyes met across the flames, and Vanessa raised her goblet in a mocking toast before turning her back deliberately. Ignore her, Kane said quietly. She's trying to bait you into a reaction she can use against you. I know. Mira forced herself to look away. Doesn't mean it's not working. A commotion near the edge of the festival grounds drew their attention. A group of wolves Mira didn't recognize had arrived, rough-looking, with an edge of desperation about them. They wore mismatched clothing, and several bore visible scars. Rogues, someone whispered nearby. Why are rogues here? Marcus was already moving toward them, his expression stern. But before he reached them, one of the rogues, a tall male with graying hair and proud bearing, spoke loudly enough for the nearest groups to hear. We seek audience with the Alpha Prime and his mate. We come with news of the Deadlands. Mira felt King go still beside her. The Deadlands, the territory she'd mentioned in her wisdom trial. The solution she'd proposed to the rogue problem. This should be discussed in private, Marcus said firmly, but the rogue shook his head. No, what we have to say concerns the entire territory. We will speak here in the open before witnesses. The crowd was gathering now, sensing drama. Mira could see the calculation in Marcus's eyes. Send them away and risk looking like he was hiding something, or allow this disruption to the festival. Very well, Marcus said. Speak. The rogue's gaze found Mira across the crowd. You are the one who spoke of giving sanctuary to the Deadlands survivors, who proposed integration rather than warfare. I did, Mira said, her heart hammering. She hadn't expected her theoretical solution to become immediately relevant. Then you should know, there are more of us than you imagine. Dozens of families, maybe hundreds of wolves, scattered across the wasteland trying to survive. We heard rumors of your proposal. We came to see if it was real or just empty words meant to score political points. The accusation in his tone made several wolves bristle, but Mira stepped forward before anyone else could speak. It wasn't empty words. I meant what I said. The pack should offer sanctuary to those willing to follow our laws and contribute to our society. And who speaks for these packs? The rogue challenged. You? An untested girl who's been the Alpha Prime's mate for barely a month. She speaks for me, Kane said, his voice carrying absolute authority. And I am Alpha Prime. If Mira says we offer sanctuary, then we offer sanctuary. But the logistics, someone from the crowd objected. One of the border pack alphas. Integrating hundreds of rogues into existing packs? The resources required, the security concerns, are all valid points that need to be addressed, Mira said, cutting off what was about to become a shouting match. Which is why this isn't a decision to be made in a single night. But the principle stands. We have wolves dying in the Deadlands when we have the resources to help them. That's not a security problem. That's a moral failure. The silence that followed was profound. Mira had just called out the entire territory's leadership for neglect, and she'd done it publicly, in front of witnesses from every major pack. The rogue leader studied her with new respect. You have courage, at least. More than most of the soft pack wolves who've never known real hunger. He turned to Marcus. We will wait 3 days for a formal response. If the packs are truly willing to negotiate sanctuary, we will return with representatives from all the Deadlands families. If not, he didn't finish the threat, but it hung in the air. As the rogues departed, the festival erupted into heated discussion. Mira found herself at the center of a storm of opinions. Some supporting her stance, others calling it naive, many simply wanting to know what she thought she was doing making policy decisions at a social gathering. That was bold, a new voice said. Mira turned to find a striking woman in her 40s approaching, with copper-colored hair and shrewd green eyes. Possibly too bold. You've just committed the Alpha Prime to a course of action that will require significant resources and political capital. I committed us to being decent, Mira replied, though her stomach was churning with uncertainty. Had she overstepped? Made promises Kane couldn't keep? Through the bond, she felt Kane's response, not anger or frustration, but fierce approval. He'd meant what he said. Her word was his word. The copper-haired woman smiled. I'm Helena Riversong, Alpha of the Northern Pine Pack. And I think you might be exactly what this territory needs. Someone who still remembers what it's like to be powerless, who fights for those without voices. She paused. My pack borders the Deadlands. If you're serious about this sanctuary plan, I'll support it. We can start with my territory. You will. Mira couldn't hide her surprise. Someone needs to. Helena glanced around at the other pack leaders, many of whom were still arguing. This territory has grown complacent, comfortable. We've forgotten that strength isn't just about power. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. You reminded us of that tonight. As Helena walked away, Meredith appeared at Myra's elbow. Well, that was certainly eventful. Did I mess up? Mira asked quietly. Speaking for the packs without consulting them first? You spoke from conviction, which is never a mess up, though you've certainly made things interesting. Meredith's expression was thoughtful. The rogues coming here tonight. That wasn't coincidence. Someone told them about your proposal. Someone wanted to put you on the spot. Myra's gaze drifted back to where Vanessa stood with her group. The Blackthorn daughter was watching the commotion with a satisfied smirk. Vanessa, Mira said. She's trying to make me look foolish. Either I back down from my words and look weak, or I commit to something impossible and fail publicly. Except you've turned it into an opportunity, Kane said, joining their conversation. Helena Riversong's support is significant. If one of the border packs is willing to lead integration efforts, others may follow, and you've positioned yourself as someone who keeps their word, who has principles beyond political convenience. Or as someone naive and idealistic who makes promises without understanding the consequences, Mira countered. Then we make sure those promises are kept. Kane took her hand. We have 3 days to develop an actual plan, to turn your moral stance into practical policy. Think you're up for that? Despite her nervousness, Mira found herself smiling. After surviving 3 death trials, policy development sounds almost relaxing. The rest of the festival passed in a blur of conversations and negotiations. By the time they returned to the estate well after midnight, Myra's head was spinning with names and alliances, and the massive undertaking she'd somehow committed them to. I can't believe I did that, she said, collapsing onto the sofa in their private sitting room. I basically announced a major policy shift in front of the entire territory without any preparation. You spoke from the heart, Kane said, settling beside her. Sometimes that's more powerful than any prepared speech. He pulled her against his side. Though Meredith is right, we need to be more careful. Vanessa is clearly escalating her tactics. Public embarrassment didn't work, so now she's trying to trap you into impossible situations. At least she's creative about it. Kane's laugh was low and warm. Only you would admire your enemy's strategy while they're actively trying to destroy you. Not admire. Acknowledge. Mira tilted her head to look at him. She's smart, connected, and absolutely determined. Underestimating her would be stupid, which is why we won't. His expression grew serious. But Mira, tonight you showed something beyond just surviving or defending yourself. You showed leadership, vision, the ability to see problems others ignore, and the courage to address them. He cupped her cheek. That's what a true alpha's mate looks like. Not someone who stands behind their partner, but someone who stands beside them, shaping the future together. Tears pricked Myra's eyes. A month ago, she'd been a girl who couldn't even speak at her own family's dinner table. Now she was making policy decisions that would affect hundreds of lives. I'm terrified I'll fail, she admitted. That I'll let down those rogues, or make things worse, or prove that everyone who doubted me was right. Then we fail together, Kane said simply. And we learn and we try again. That's what leading means. Not being perfect, but being willing to keep trying even when you're afraid. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and through the bond Mira felt the truth of his words. They were in this together. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. And maybe, just maybe, they could actually make a difference. Chapter 12. The Deadlands Accord. 3 days wasn't nearly enough time to develop a comprehensive integration plan for hundreds of displaced wolves. but Mira was determined to try. The morning after the festival, she woke before dawn and found Kane already in his study, surrounded by maps and reports. He looked up when she entered, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept at all. "Tell me you at least rested a few hours," she said, moving to stand beside him. "Couldn't. Too much to figure out." He gestured to the maps. "If we're serious about this sanctuary plan, we need to understand the full scope. How many wolves are actually in the Deadlands? What resources do they need? Which packs can support integration without straining their own resources?" Mira studied the maps, her mind working through the logistics. Helena offered her territory as a starting point. "What do we know about the Northern Pine Pack?" "Strong, stable, well-managed. Helena's been alpha for 15 years, and her pack has grown steadily under her leadership. They have good hunting grounds and a surplus of resources." Kane pointed to the map. "But even they can't absorb hundreds of rogues at once. We need to spread the integration across multiple packs." "Which packs would be willing?" Mira asked. "And which ones would resist?" Over the next hour, they analyzed each major pack in the territory. Some, like Helena's, seemed likely to support the plan. Others, particularly those allied with the Blackthorns, would almost certainly oppose it. Meredith arrived mid-morning with breakfast and a stack of additional documents. "I've been pulling records from previous integration attempts. There have been 3 in the last century, all with mixed results. The most successful was 40 years ago when the Riverstone Pack absorbed refugees from a flood-destroyed territory." "What made it successful?" Mira asked, accepting a cup of tea gratefully. "Clear structure. Probationary periods where the newcomers had to prove their commitment to pack law. Mentorship programs pairing established pack members with refugees. And most importantly, immediate useful work. They didn't just give them charity. They gave them purpose. So we need jobs, not just handouts," Mira said, understanding dawning. "The rogues aren't looking for pity. They're looking for a chance to contribute, to rebuild their lives." "Exactly." Meredith smiled approvingly. "Frame it that way. Not as charity for desperate rogues, but as an expansion of the workforce, new blood for struggling border packs, and you'll get much more support from the alphas." By midday, they had the outline of a plan. Not perfect, but workable. They would propose a 3-phase integration. Phase 1. Assessment and temporary camps. The Deadlands families would be interviewed, their skills and needs documented. Those willing to follow pack law would be placed in supervised temporary settlements, while permanent placements were arranged. Phase 2. Integration assignments. Based on their skills and the needs of various packs, refugees would be assigned to territories that could support them. Families would be kept together. Everyone would undergo a 6-month probationary period. Phase 3. Full citizenship. After proving their commitment and value, the refugees would be granted full pack membership with all rights and responsibilities. "It's ambitious," Marcus said when they presented the plan to him that afternoon. He'd arrived at the estate with several other council members. Those Kane trusted to give honest feedback. But possibly workable. The probationary period protects the pack's interests while giving the refugees genuine opportunities. "What about security concerns?" asked another counselor, a practical-minded woman named Celeste. "Some of these rogues may have turned violent out of desperation. How do we screen for that?" "Background checks during the assessment phase," Mira said. "Anyone with a history of unprovoked violence or refusal to follow basic pack law would be rejected. We're offering sanctuary, not amnesty for criminals. And what if they lie? Rogues have no official records to verify their claims. Then we rely on character assessments from multiple sources, including other refugees. The desperate families trying to survive will know which individuals among them are genuinely dangerous." Mira met Celeste's skeptical gaze. "Look, I'm not naive enough to think this will be easy or without risk. But the alternative, leaving hundreds of wolves to die or become so desperate they turn to raiding, that's a bigger security threat than trying to help them." Celeste studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair point." The discussion continued for hours, refining details and addressing concerns. By the time the council members left, Myra's head ached from the intensity of focus, but they had a solid proposal to present when the rogues returned. That night, as Mira and Kane prepared for bed, she found herself reflecting on how much had changed. A month ago, she couldn't have imagined sitting in a room with powerful alphas, defending policy positions and holding her ground against skepticism. "You were impressive today," Kane said, as if reading her thoughts. He came up behind her where she stood at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist. "The way you handled Celeste's concerns, the practical approach to security. You're a natural at this." "I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up," Mira admitted, leaning back against his chest. "That I made promises I can't keep. Then we'll keep them together." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "That's what being partners means." The third day arrived faster than Mira would have liked. By noon, word had spread that the rogues were returning, and a crowd had gathered at the neutral meeting ground Marcus had designated, an open field halfway between the Ashford estate and the Deadlands border. Mira stood beside Kane, with Meredith, Sarah, and several trusted council members behind them. Across the field, Helena and a handful of other supportive pack leaders had positioned themselves prominently, a show of unity. But off to the side, Mira spotted Vanessa with her mother Iris and several other Blackthorn allies. They hadn't spoken out against the plan publicly yet, but their presence here suggested they were waiting for an opportunity to undermine it. The rogues arrived as the sun reached its peak. There were more than Mira had expected. At least 50 adults, plus children clinging to their parents' hands. They looked tired, wary, but beneath the exhaustion, she saw something else. Hope. The gray-haired leader who'd spoken at the festival stepped forward. "I am Garrett, formerly of the Ashwood Pack before the fire destroyed our territory. I speak for the Deadlands survivors. And I am Kane Ashford, Alpha Prime of this territory. This is my mate, Mira, and our council representatives. We've heard your request for sanctuary, and we've prepared a proposal." Kane outlined the three-phase plan clearly and concisely. Mira watched Garrett's expression shift from suspicion to cautious interest as the details emerged. When Kane finished, silence fell over the gathering. "You would truly do this?" Garrett asked. "Give us a chance to rebuild our lives, not as charity cases, but as contributing members of your packs." "We would," Mira said, stepping forward. "But there are conditions. You must follow pack law absolutely. You must work to support yourselves and your assigned packs. And you must accept that trust is earned, not given. The probationary period isn't optional." "We accept those terms," Garrett said without hesitation. He turned to the other refugees. "All in favor?" A chorus of agreement rose from the gathered wolves. Several had tears streaming down their faces. "Then we have an accord," Marcus announced formally. "The Deadlands survivors will be granted provisional sanctuary under the terms outlined. Assessment will begin tomorrow at the Northern Pine Territory." As the crowd began to disperse, Helena approached with several of her pack members. "We'll need supplies, additional housing, probably more healers." "We'll provide support," Kane assured her. "You won't bear this burden alone." Mira was about to add her own thanks when she felt it, a spike of malicious satisfaction through the bond. Not from Kane, but... She turned sharply. Vanessa stood 20 feet away, speaking quietly with Iris and two other wolves Mira didn't recognize. As Mira watched, one of the strangers, a rough-looking male with calculating eyes, glanced toward the departing refugees with an expression that made her blood run cold. "Kane," she murmured quietly. "Those wolves with Vanessa. Do you know them?" He followed her gaze, and his expression hardened. "No, and they're not from any pack I recognize." Through the bond, Mira felt his growing suspicion. If Vanessa was conspiring with unknown wolves at a meeting about refugee integration. "We need to have them followed," Mira said quietly. "Something's not right." Kane nodded almost imperceptibly and caught Sarah's eye across the crowd. A subtle gesture, and Sarah began drifting casually toward Vanessa's group. But as Mira watched, the unknown wolves melted away into the crowd, disappearing before Sarah could get close. And Vanessa just smiled at Mira across the distance. A smile that said, "You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming." That night, Mira couldn't shake the feeling of impending disaster. The sanctuary plan had been approved. The refugees had hope. Everything should have felt like a victory. Instead, she lay awake long after Kane had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering what trap Vanessa was setting. Because that smile had been a promise. Something was coming. Something worse than false accusations or social sabotage. And Mira had no idea how to prepare for a threat she couldn't see. Chapter 13. Shadows and Sabotage. The integration began smoothly, too smoothly, in Myra's opinion. Helena's territory had been transformed into a temporary processing center. Tents dotted the landscape, organized into neat rows. The Deadlands refugees moved through assessment stations where PAC officials documented their skills, family structures, and needs. Children played under watchful supervision while their parents underwent interviews. Mira walked through the camp with Kane, observing the process. Most of the refugees were cooperative, even eager. They answered questions honestly, submitted to basic health screenings, and followed the established protocols without complaint. "It's going well," Helena said, falling into step beside them. "Better than I expected, honestly. These aren't hardened criminals. They're just desperate families trying to survive." "That's what I kept telling the council," Mira replied. But her eyes kept scanning the crowd, looking for threats she couldn't name. "You're expecting trouble," Helena observed. "I'm expecting Vanessa to make her move. She didn't fight the sanctuary plan openly, which means she's planning something worse." As if summoned by her words, a commotion erupted near one of the assessment tents. Raised voices, then shouting. Kane was already moving before Mira registered what was happening, and she hurried after him. They found Garrett, the Deadlands leader, facing off against one of Helena's pack enforcers. The enforcer's hand was on his weapon, and Garrett's wolf was clearly visible in his eyes, struggling for dominance. "What's happening here?" Kane's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "This man was caught stealing," the enforcer said sharply. "Food stores from the supply tent. We have witnesses." "I wasn't stealing," Garrett snarled. "I was redistributing. Some families have more than they need while others are going hungry. I was trying to balance it out. By taking without permission," the enforcer countered. "That's theft, regardless of your intentions." Mira felt her stomach drop. This was it. The first real test of the sanctuary plan, and it was happening faster than she'd hoped. If they came down too hard on Garrett, the other refugees would lose faith. If they were too lenient, it would undermine the rule of law they'd established. "Garrett," she said carefully, stepping forward. "The supplies are being distributed based on family size and need. The assessments ensure everyone gets what they require. Taking from one family to give to another isn't your decision to make." "And who decides?" Garrett challenged. "Pack wolves who've never known real hunger? Who don't understand what it's like to watch your children starve." "I understand better than you think," Mira said quietly, and something in her voice made Garrett pause. "I grew up as the lowest member of my pack, given scraps when they remembered I existed. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be deemed unworthy of basic care. That's why I fought for this sanctuary plan, so others wouldn't have to suffer like I did." She took a breath. "But this plan only works if everyone follows the same rules. You can't make exceptions for yourself because you think your cause is just. That's how communities fall apart." Garrett's anger deflated slightly. "There's a family, the Thorntons. Their youngest is sick, and they've been getting standard rations when they need more. I was just trying to help." "Then you should have come to me," Helena said, her voice firm but not unkind. "We have procedures for medical cases that require additional resources. Taking matters into your own hands undermines the system we're trying to build." "So what happens now?" Garrett asked, his shoulders sagging. "You throw us out for one mistake." Kane exchanged a glance with Mira, and through the bond, she felt his question. This was her plan, her vision. What did she think was fair? "Not thrown out," Mira said. "But there are consequences. You'll be moved to supervised housing for the remainder of the assessment period. And you'll work double shifts helping with camp logistics. You want to make decisions about resource distribution? Learn how it's actually done properly." Garrett studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough." As the situation diffused and the crowd dispersed, Mira let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Crisis averted. But she knew there would be more. What she didn't know was that in a tent on the far side of camp, 2 of the refugees, who'd passed through assessment, were quietly meeting with a figure in a dark cloak. "The Thornton incident worked perfectly," one of them reported. "Made the Deadlands leader look unstable, planted seeds of doubt about whether these rogues can actually integrate." "Good," came the response, a female voice, carefully modulated to avoid recognition. "But that was just the beginning. Phase 2 begins tonight. Make sure there's no way to trace it back to us." The cloaked figure slipped away into the growing darkness, and the 2 infiltrators exchanged satisfied smiles. That night, Mira woke to screaming. She was on her feet instantly, Kane already beside her, both of them racing toward the window. In the distance, flames lit up the night sky. The camp, the refugee camp, was on fire. They ran, throwing on clothes as they moved, the bond singing with shared urgency. By the time they reached the camp, chaos reigned. Tents were ablaze, wolves were running in every direction, and the smell of smoke and fear was overwhelming. "Get the children out first," Helena was shouting, organizing her pack members into rescue teams. "Check every tent." Mira shifted to her wolf form without thinking, using her smaller size to dart into burning tents, checking for anyone trapped inside. She found a young child, no more than 5, frozen with fear in a corner. Mira grabbed the child's shirt in her teeth and dragged them out, passing them to a waiting pack member before diving back in. The heat was intense, the smoke choking, but she kept going, kept searching, kept saving anyone she could find. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, all the occupants were accounted for. Several injured, many traumatized, but alive. The fire was being brought under control by pack members with water magic. Mira shifted back to human form, coughing from the smoke, her skin singed in several places. Kane found her immediately, checking her for serious injuries with desperate hands. "I'm okay," she rasped. "Everyone. Minor injuries, mostly smoke inhalation. Could have been much worse." His expression was grim. "This wasn't an accident, Mira. Multiple fires started simultaneously in different parts of the camp. Someone set this deliberately." The implications hit her like a physical blow. Sabotage. Someone had tried to burn the refugees alive, or at the very least, destroy the camp and make the sanctuary plan look like a disaster. Marcus arrived within the hour, along with several other council members and pack leaders. In the cold light of dawn, the extent of the damage was clear. A third of the camp was destroyed. Supplies were ruined. And worst of all, trust had been shattered. "This is what comes of rushing into poorly planned charity," Iris Blackthorne said, her voice carrying across the gathered leaders. "Inviting rogues into our territory without proper vetting. We're lucky no one died." "No one died because my pack acted quickly," Helena countered. "And this wasn't an accident. Someone deliberately tried to sabotage the integration. Or," Iris said smoothly, "the rogues themselves set the fires. Desperate wolves, resentful of the rules and structure we're trying to impose. Perhaps some of them aren't as grateful for sanctuary as they pretend to be." Mira saw the trap immediately. Blame the refugees for the fire, turn public opinion against them, force the sanctuary plan to collapse. "That's absurd," she said, her voice hoarse from smoke but firm. "The refugees risked their lives saving each other, families protecting their children. Why would they destroy their own supplies and shelter? Unless they never intended to integrate peacefully," Vanessa said, appearing beside her mother. "Unless this was always a plan to infiltrate our territory, gain our trust, then strike from within." The murmurs from the gathered crowd were increasingly hostile. Mira could see the sanctuary plan crumbling before her eyes, destroyed not by honest opposition, but by calculated sabotage and lies. "Enough." Kane's voice cut through the rising tension. "Before we make accusations, we investigate. Marcus, I want your best trackers examining the fire sites. I want to know exactly how these fires started and who set them." "Already underway," Marcus said. "But Alpha Prime, even if we find proof of sabotage, the damage is done. Half the territory now believes the refugees are dangerous. Rebuilding that trust will be nearly impossible." He was right, and they all knew it. Even if they proved the fires were set by outsiders, the fear had taken root. The sanctuary plan was on life support. Mira looked out over the burned camp, at the refugees huddled in makeshift shelters, watching the pack leaders with expressions of fear and betrayal. They'd been promised safety, and violence had found them anyway. Through the bond, she felt Kane's frustration and rage. He wanted to protect her vision, to make this work, but the sabotage had been expertly executed. "We don't give up," Mira said quietly. "We find who did this, we prove it, and we show the territory that we keep our promises even when others try to destroy them." "Spoken like someone who doesn't understand politics," Iris said coldly. "This plan is finished, girl. Accept it gracefully and move on." Mira turned to face the Blackthorn matriarch directly. "No, I know exactly what you're doing, Iris. You and Vanessa. Those unknown wolves at the meeting, this convenient fire that makes the refugees look dangerous. This has your fingerprints all over it." "Careful," Iris said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. Accusing a council member of treason without proof is itself a serious offense. Then we'll get proof, Kane said, moving to stand beside Mira. Because my mate is right. This sabotage is too convenient, too perfectly timed to damage the sanctuary plan. Someone wanted this to fail, and we're going to find out who. As the sun rose fully over the burned camp, battle lines were drawn. The sanctuary plan hung by a thread. Vanessa and Iris were clearly plotting something larger, and Mira found herself in a fight not just for refugee integration, but for the soul of the entire territory. And somewhere in the shadows, the real architects of the fire were watching, satisfied with the chaos they'd created. Phase 2 was complete. Phase 3 was about to begin. Chapter 14. Hunting the Truth. The investigation began at first light. Marcus's trackers combed through the burned sections of camp, examining every charred tent pole and scorched ground for evidence. Mira watched from a distance, her body still aching from the night's exertions, her mind racing with possibilities. Kane stood beside her, his tension visible in every line of his body. "We need concrete evidence," he said quietly. "Suspicions aren't enough. If we're going to accuse the Blackthorns of sabotage, we need proof that will stand up before the entire council." "I know." Myra's gaze drifted to where the refugees had been relocated to a more secure area. "But even if we find proof, the damage is done. Half of them want to leave now, return to the Deadlands rather than risk another attack. Can you blame them? No. But if they leave, Vanessa wins. The sanctuary plan collapses. I look like a naive fool who endangered lives with impossible ideals. And the message to every struggling wolf in the territory is clear. We don't help our own." A shout from the investigation site drew their attention. One of the trackers was waving Marcus over, pointing to something on the ground. Mira and Kane hurried over. "What did you find?" Kane demanded. The tracker held up a small glass vial, partially melted but still intact. "Accelerant. This is what spread the fires so quickly. Someone doused multiple tents with this before lighting them." Marcus took the vial, examining it carefully. "This isn't something you'd find in a refugee camp. This is expensive, refined fire oil. The kind used by professional arsonists or military units. So the refugees definitely didn't set the fires themselves," Mira said. "They wouldn't have access to something like this." "Which proves sabotage," Kane said. "But not who ordered it." "Actually," the tracker said, "we might have more. Follow me." He led them to the edge of the camp, where the forest began. In the soft earth, partially obscured by fallen leaves, were boot prints. 2 individuals, both wearing specialized footwear. Not refugee boots. These are quality leather, reinforced soles. "And look here." He pointed to a disturbed area near a tree. "They waited here for at least an hour before the attack, watching the camp. Waiting for the right moment. Can you track them?" Kane asked. "Already did. The trail leads about a mile into the forest before it reaches a road. Looks like they had horses waiting. From there." The tracker shrugged. "Could be anywhere." Mira knelt beside the boot prints, studying them. Something about the pattern was familiar. Where had she seen that distinctive tread before? Then it hit her. The unknown wolves at the meeting. The ones talking to Vanessa. One of them was wearing boots with that same reinforced sole pattern. I remember noticing it because it was unusual. Most wolves prefer softer footwear that's easier to shift in. Kane's expression hardened. So we have proof of professional saboteurs, and a connection to Vanessa through the wolves she was conspiring with. But it's still circumstantial. She'll claim she was just talking to visitors, that she had no knowledge of their real intentions. "Then we need to find those wolves," Mira said. "Make them confess who hired them." Easier said than done. They've had time to disappear. Unless they're still in the territory, a new voice interjected. Sarah emerged from the forest, her expression grim. "I've been doing some digging. Those 2 unknown wolves at the meeting? They were spotted 2 days ago at a tavern near the Blackthorn estate, bragging about a big payday coming their way." "You're sure?" Kane asked. "The tavern keeper knows me." She provided descriptions that match. "They're still around, probably waiting for the final payment for their work." Mira felt a surge of hope. "If we can catch them before they leave. Then we get our confession," Kane finished. "Marcus, I need your authorization to conduct an investigation on Blackthorn territory." Marcus's expression was troubled. "That's complicated. The Blackthorns are a powerful family. Sending investigators onto their land without concrete evidence could trigger a political crisis." We have evidence of sabotage, Mira protested. Refugees could have died. We have evidence someone set fires. We don't have evidence the Blackthorns ordered it. There's a difference. Marcus held up a hand before Mira could argue. I'm not saying don't investigate. I'm saying be smart about it. If you go in heavy-handed and find nothing, Iris will use it to paint you as paranoid tyrants who abuse your authority. Then what do you suggest? Kane asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. Marcus thought for a moment. The tavern is technically neutral ground, not Blackthorn territory proper. You could stake it out, wait for the saboteurs to return. If you catch them there and they confess, then you have grounds to investigate further. And if they don't return? Mira asked. Then we look for other evidence. Financial records showing large unexplained payments from the Blackthorns. Witnesses who saw them meeting with these wolves. Build the case piece by piece. Marcus met their eyes seriously. I know it's frustrating, but if you're going to take down a family as powerful as the Blackthorns, you need an airtight case. One mistake, and they'll destroy you. That night, Mira found herself in the last place she expected. Sitting in a dingy tavern on the edge of the territory, nursing a mug of weak ale, and trying to look inconspicuous. Sarah sat across from her, similarly disguised in common clothing that hid her warrior's build. Kane was somewhere outside with several of his most trusted guards, ready to move if the saboteurs appeared. This is ridiculous, Mira muttered. We're the Alpha Prime's mate and his top enforcer, sitting in a tavern playing detective. Welcome to real leadership, Sarah said with a slight smile. It's not all grand speeches and heroic trials. Sometimes it's just sitting in uncomfortable chairs waiting for criminals to show their faces. Hours passed. The tavern filled and emptied, filled again. Mira was starting to think this was a waste of time when two familiar figures walked through the door. The wolves from the meeting. The saboteurs. Through the bond, Mira sent a surge of alert to Kane. He responded immediately, ready but waiting for her signal. The two wolves settled at a corner table, calling for drinks and food. They were relaxed, confident. No idea they were being watched. Should have the rest of the payment by tomorrow, one of them was saying, his voice carrying in the mostly empty tavern. Lady said she'd have it ready once the job was confirmed complete. Still can't believe how well it went, the other replied. Thought for sure someone would spot us setting the fires, but everyone was so focused on the refugees, they never looked for outside threats. Myra's blood ran cold. There it was, the confession they needed, spoken openly in a public place with multiple witnesses. She caught Sarah's eye and gave a subtle nod. Time to move. They stood simultaneously, blocking the exit. At the same moment, Kane and his guards entered through the front door, cutting off any escape. The saboteurs realized their mistake too late. They leapt to their feet, hands going to weapons, but they were surrounded. You're under arrest, Kane said, his voice resonating with absolute authority. For arson, sabotage, and conspiracy to commit murder. You've got nothing, one of them snarled. We're just travelers passing through. You're mercenaries who set fire to a refugee camp, Mira corrected. And you just confessed to it in a room full of witnesses. We've also got boot prints, accelerant vials, and testimony placing you in conspiracy with Vanessa Blackthorn. The color drained from their faces as they realized how thoroughly they'd been trapped. Last chance, Kane said coldly. Cooperate, tell us who hired you, and I'll show leniency. Refuse, and you face full punishment for attempted mass murder. The two wolves exchanged glances. Loyalty warred with survival instinct. Finally, one of them broke. It was Vanessa, he said. Vanessa Blackthorn hired us. Said she wanted to destroy the sanctuary plan, make the mate look incompetent and dangerous. Paid us half up front, promised the rest when the job was done. Did Iris Blackthorn know about this? Marcus asked, stepping forward from where he'd been waiting in the shadows. Don't know. We only dealt with Vanessa. But, the saboteur hesitated. She mentioned her mother would be pleased when it was done, that this would finally remove the half-blood stain from the Alpha Prime side. The hatred in those words made Myra's wolf snarl, but she kept her human form, kept her composure. You'll repeat this confession before the full council, Marcus said. Under truth's spell, so there can be no doubt. As the guards took the saboteurs into custody, Mira felt a grim satisfaction. They had their proof. They had their confession. Now came the reckoning. But as they left the tavern, Kane pulled her aside. This isn't over. When we confront the Blackthorns with this evidence, they'll fight back with everything they have. Vanessa will face serious consequences, possibly exile or worse. Iris will defend her daughter, and their allies will rally to their side. Are you saying we shouldn't do this? Mira asked, searching his face. No, I'm saying we need to be prepared for war. Not physical war, but political war. The kind that can tear a territory apart. He cupped her face gently. I'm asking if you're ready for that. Because once we take this step, there's no going back. Mira thought about the refugees, huddled in temporary shelters, afraid to trust again. She thought about the children who'd nearly died in the fires. She thought about every wolf in the territory who needed to know that justice existed, that the powerful couldn't destroy the weak without consequences. I'm ready, she said firmly. Let them come. We've got the truth on our side, and that's more powerful than any alliance the Blackthorns can muster. Kane kissed her then, fierce and proud, and through the bond she felt his love and his determination. Tomorrow, they would bring the evidence before the council. Tomorrow, the Blackthorns would answer for their crimes. Tomorrow, everything would change. Chapter 15, The Reckoning. The emergency council session was called for dawn. By the time the sun rose, every major pack leader in the territory had gathered in the Grand Council chamber, along with witnesses, healers prepared to cast truth spells, and a crowd of lesser wolves who'd heard rumors and wanted to see justice, or spectacle. Mira stood beside Kane at the head of the chamber, her spine straight, her expression calm despite the churning anxiety in her gut. Across the room, Vanessa and Iris Blackthorn stood with their family and allies, their faces masks of aristocratic disdain. Marcus called the session to order. We are here to address charges of sabotage, arson, and conspiracy to commit harm against the Deadlands refugees under the protection of this territory. The accused are Vanessa Blackthorn and, by association, any who aided her actions. This is absurd, Iris said immediately. My daughter has committed no crime. This is a politically motivated witch hunt orchestrated by a half-blood girl who can't handle opposition to her naive policies. Then you'll have no objection to hearing the evidence, Kane said coldly. The two captured saboteurs were brought forward, bound in silver chains that prevented shifting. They looked significantly less confident than they had in the tavern. State your names for the record, Marcus commanded. Darren Reed, said the first. Cole Winters, said the second. And your profession? A pause. Mercenaries. We take jobs for pay. Including arson? Marcus asked. Darren's jaw tightened, but under the weight of the assembled council's stares, he nodded. Yes. Tell us about the fire at the Northern Pine refugee camp. What followed was a detailed confession. The hiring, the payment, the deliberate targeting of multiple tents to maximize chaos and damage. As Darren spoke, healers wove truth magic around him. A faint golden shimmer that would reveal lies. The magic remained steady and bright. He was telling the truth. And who hired you for this job? Marcus asked. Vanessa Blackthorn. The chamber erupted. Shouts of disbelief, anger, vindication. Marcus had to call for order 3 times before the noise died down. Lies, Vanessa shouted. They're clearly being coerced or paid to say this. I've never seen these wolves before in my life. Really? Mira stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Then why were you seen speaking with them at the meeting ground 3 days before the fire? We have witnesses who can confirm the meeting. I speak with many wolves. That proves nothing. Then explain the payment, Kane said. He nodded to one of his guards, who brought forward a leather satchel. We obtained a warrant to search your private chambers this morning. We found this, gold coins totaling exactly half the amount these mercenaries claim they were promised. The same distinctive mint marks as the coins found in their possession. Vanessa's composure cracked for just a moment. Those could have been planted. You're the Alpha Prime. You have access to everything. Which is why we also have this. Marcus produced a document. A written contract, signed by you, arranging payment for security consultation services. The date matches when these mercenaries say they were hired. The amount matches what they were promised. You went through my private papers? Vanessa's voice rose with genuine outrage now. That's a violation of nothing, when there's probable cause of serious crimes, Marcus interrupted. The warrant was legally obtained and properly executed. This evidence is valid. The truth magic around the mercenaries continued to glow steadily as they corroborated every detail. The contract, the payment, even direct quotes from their conversations with Vanessa. Iris stood abruptly. Even if my daughter did hire these wolves, which I don't concede, Perhaps it was for legitimate security purposes. Perhaps she suspected the refugees themselves of planning violence and took steps to protect the territory. By burning their camp with children inside. Myra's voice was sharp. That's your defense? That Vanessa tried to murder families as a security measure? I'm saying we should consider all possibilities before rushing to judgment. We're not rushing, Kane said. We're following the evidence. Evidence that clearly shows your daughter conspired to sabotage a lawfully approved sanctuary plan, endangered dozens of lives, and attempted to undermine territorial governance through illegal violence. The question, Marcus said heavily, is what sentence befits these crimes? A tense silence fell. Everyone knew the traditional punishments for such offenses. Exile, stripping of rank and title. In extreme cases, execution. I want her exiled, Mira said quietly, and every eye turned to her. Vanessa Blackthorne is stripped of all titles, privileges, and pack membership. She's banished from this territory permanently. If she returns, she faces immediate arrest. You can't, Iris started. I can, Mira interrupted. As the Alpha Prime's mate and the primary victim of this crime, I have the right to request sentencing. And I'm showing more mercy than she showed those children sleeping in tents she tried to burn. The council must vote, Marcus said. All in favor of exile for Vanessa Blackthorne? Hands rose around the chamber. Not all of them. The Blackthorne allies abstained or voted against, but more than enough. The motion passed. Vanessa's face went white, then red with rage. This isn't over. You think you've won, Half-Blood? You've just made an enemy for life. I'll find a way back. I'll find a way to destroy everything you've built. Try it, Mira said calmly. And next time, there won't be mercy. There will only be justice. Guards moved forward to escort Vanessa out. She struggled, screaming curses and threats, but they were relentless. As she was dragged from the chamber, her eyes locked on Myra's one final time. The hatred there was pure and absolute. But underneath it, Mira saw something else. Fear. Because Vanessa had finally realized that Mira wasn't going anywhere. That the girl she'd dismissed as weak and broken had become something far more dangerous. A leader with principles and the power to enforce them. When Vanessa was gone, Marcus turned to Iris. Lady Blackthorne, your family's involvement in this matter is noted. While we don't have direct evidence of your participation, your daughter acted with your family's resources and likely your implicit approval. Therefore, the Blackthorne family will pay substantial reparations to the refugee families affected by the fire. Additionally, your family's council seat is suspended for 1 year, during which you will have no vote on territorial matters. Iris's expression was carved from ice. You'll regret this, all of you. The Blackthorns have long memories. So do I, Kane said quietly. And I remember every refugee child who nearly died because your daughter couldn't accept that I chose my own mate. Remember that, Iris, before you make any more threats. The council session ended with a vote to fully reinstate and properly fund the sanctuary plan. Helena's pack would receive additional resources. The refugees would be given secure, permanent housing during the integration process. And new security measures would be implemented to prevent future sabotage. As the chamber emptied, Mira finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. Justice. Real justice for those who needed it most. You did it, Kane said softly, pulling her close. You stood up to one of the most powerful families in the territory and won. We did it, Mira corrected. Together. Outside the council chamber, they found a crowd waiting. Not just pack leaders and politicians, but ordinary wolves. Refugees from the camp, border pack members. Even some who'd been skeptical of the sanctuary plan. Garrett stepped forward from the group. We heard what happened in there. What you did for us. His voice was thick with emotion. Most of us have spent years believing no one cared whether we lived or died. You proved us wrong. You're part of this territory now, Mira said. That means you're under our protection. Always. A cheer went up from the crowd. Not polite applause or political necessity, but genuine gratitude and respect. As Mira and Kane made their way back to the estate, she felt something shift through the bond. Not just love or pride, but a deep sense of rightness. They'd faced threats and challenges, sabotage and hatred, and they'd emerged stronger. What are you thinking? Kane asked. That a month ago, I was a girl who couldn't even defend herself at a dinner table. And today, I stood before the council and demanded justice for people I barely know. She looked up at him. You were right. I was never weak. I just needed someone to show me I was allowed to be strong. You showed yourself, Kane said. I just got to watch. That night, as they lay in bed with moonlight streaming through the windows, Mira felt truly at peace for the first time since the mate bond had snapped into place. The trials were over. The threats had been dealt with. The sanctuary plan was moving forward. There will be other challenges, Kane said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Other wolves who resent your position, other threats we'll have to face. I know, Mira replied, but we'll face them together, just like we faced everything else. She felt his smile against her hair. Together, always. And as she drifted off to sleep, Mira knew that whatever came next, she was ready. Because she wasn't the broken half-blood girl anymore. She was Mira Thorne, mate to the Alpha Prime, defender of the forgotten, and a force to be reckoned with in her own right. And she was just getting started. Underscore 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 underscore. The end.